Chapter 672. Is it meaningful to ask such a question? Lu Yanqing shook her head slightly. Of course it is meaningful. When Lanfeng's gaze was firm. At least it is meaningful to me. You should also understand that it is meaningful to me. I don't want to give up, and I won't give up. I still want to work hard because you're the biggest reason why I stay in this world. Otherwise, do you know? If I concentrate on my cultivation, I'm afraid the day I ascend to the immortal realm is not far away. Lu Yanqing looked at him in surprise. Are you confident that you can integrate the 7 spirits into your life spirit? When Lan Feng smiled bitterly. If I can get rid of my selfish thoughts, it should be within 100 years, or even less. Then I should congratulate you. The cultivation world has not had a cultivator ascend to the immortal realm for many years. You're the first person to carry on the past. Lu Yanqing smiled. The first person to carry on the past? When Lan Feng mocked himself. You think too highly of me. Have you forgotten what the emissary of hell said? The real first person is by Changchun. His cultivation has long surpassed the soul formation final stage. I'm afraid that even if I ascend to the immortal realm, I will not be able to withstand a single blow from him. Lu Yanqing frowned and shook her head. Why do you have to compare yourself to him? He is different from us. He is too ambitious. What do you mean? When Lan Feng was alarmed. Are you suspecting that he has some ambition? That's why he has stayed in the human world and refused to ascend? No, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that he has any ambition. If he does, he doesn't need to hide it. No one in the cultivation world can stop him. He is too strong. Lu Yanqing hugged the gauze hat in her hand and sighed against the morning sun. I said he is ambitious because I feel that he is different from us. Among us, some of us fight for power and profit to be the overlord. Some of us fight for a false name on the cultivation world's ranking list. He does not care about these things at all. I once heard Nongzhu say that Bai Changchun has been pursuing some illusory great path. Great path? When Lan Feng was surprised. What is great path? What is great path? Why haven't I heard of it before? Lu Yanqing shook her head and said, I've never heard of it. I've asked Nongzhu, but Nongzhu doesn't know what it is. I just occasionally hear similar words from Bai Changchun's mouth, saying that it is likely to be a cultivation realm in Bai Changchun's ideal. When Lan Feng pondered for a moment, then shook his head and said, let's not talk about him. His cultivation method is incredible. I've never heard of him using things like spirit stones. He's walking a different path from us. Maybe the path he's walking is the so-called Great Way. Those who walk different paths cannot make plans together. Even if you told us, it would be difficult for us to understand. For Bai Changchun, what he pursued was the Great Tao, but for me, what I pursued was you. I just want to know what kind of man you like. I hope you can point out a path for me to reach the other side. Don't force me, okay? A tired look appeared on Lu Yanqing's face. I've never forced you. When Lanfeng's face also had a trace of a bleak smile as he said, but too many things have happened in the cultivation world recently. I'm inexplicably a little worried. If I don't ask you this time, I'm afraid I won't have the chance to in the future. So please forgive me for being straightforward this time. Lu Yanqing turned back to look at him in surprise, as if she did not understand why he would suddenly say such obscure words. She slowly turned back to face the mountains under the sun, paused, and said, I used to secretly like many men. This sentence suddenly made Wen Lanfeng a little dumbfounded. He looked at Lu Yanqing dumbfoundedly, as if he didn't know her. Lu Yanqing continued to say faintly, I've forgotten when it was. It's been too long. It seems that at that time, I hadn't been accepted by Master, or maybe I was still at the age of my first love. There are always some men who make my heart beat faster when I first see them. That feeling of shyness and admiration is really good. I was accepted by Master in a daze. After stepping into the cultivation world for a few years, I realized, maybe it's because our spirit Fong Valley has always been practicing medicine and helping the world. I've seen too many secular people live and die. Unconsciously, I can no longer have any feelings for the short-lived secular people. I only have sympathy and help. When I cast my gaze towards the cultivation world, who would have thought that all I saw was mutual deception, unscrupulous competition, and incessant fighting and killing? I was born with an aversion to these things. This is the reason why I never made any choice. After listening to these words, when Lanfeng's dumbfounded expression finally eased, he nodded silently to show that he understood. Which woman didn't have the age of a young girl thinking of love? After a pause, he said, "Is there no man in the cultivation world that you like?" "There was one, but it can't be described as a man that I like. It's just that his great compassion made me admire him. There's no love between a man and a woman. If I have to choose one, I'd rather choose him," Lu Yanqing said frankly. When Lanfeng's pupils suddenly shrank, he racked his brains, but with his experience, he couldn't think of anyone in the cultivation world who deserved the title of great compassion. His chest rose and fell rapidly as he asked, "Can you tell me who that person is? Do I know him?" "You know him." Lu Yanqing nodded. When Lanfeng could not suppress his excitement and asked, "Who is it?" "You once challenged him to a duel because of my slip of the tongue. As a result, you were seriously injured by him and had to retreat for 100 years. Perhaps you and everyone else thinks I was just being perfunctory, but the fact is that I was able to say those words, and I had the same idea in my mind. I couldn't help saying them, and I ended up causing you trouble." Lu Yanqing's expression was very calm when she said this. It seemed that she had decided not to do anything to hide from Wen Lanfeng. However, when Wen Lanfeng heard this, he was stunned as if he was struck by lightning. After a long time, he murmured, "Bai. The person you're talking about is Bai Changchun." Then he came to his senses and shook his head again and again. "No, this is your excuse. I have no opinion on what evaluation you use to describe Bai Changchun, but you said that Bai Changchun is merciful. Not to mention me. Everyone in the world knows that he is iron-blooded and ruthless. Countless people have died in his hands. How can he be worthy of the title of great compassion? What everyone sees may not be true. Maybe what I see is also an illusion." Lu Yanqing was silent and said, "I just regret that I don't have Bai Changchun's ability. I practice medicine in Lingfang Valley, and the number of people I can save is limited. On the surface, Bai Changchun seems to be ruthless, but in fact he has shocked the entire cultivation world. No one dares to act recklessly. Otherwise, the cultivation world will be in chaos. I'm afraid that the damage to the mortals in the secular world will be incalculable. I don't know how many people will die." When Lanfeng said in a deep voice, "This may be your wishful thinking," Lu Yanqing smiled non-committally and continued to say, "In fact, with Bai Changchun's cultivation, there is no need to intervene in the affairs of the cultivation world. No one dares to look down on him, and he does not want to get anything from the cultivation world. Besides, he disdains to intervene in the affairs of the cultivation world. Then why does he make a move every time the cultivation world is in a state of panic? Haven't you noticed? As long as he makes a move, the chaos in the cultivation world will immediately calm down and restore the state of mutual checks and balances. The timing of his move is very subtle. Obviously, he is not killing for the sake of killing." When Lanfeng fell in a deep thought when he heard this. After a long time, he slowly said, "As an outsider, you can see it more clearly than us. Your words remind me of the purpose that Bai Changchun set for the World Chamber of Commerce last time. Maybe you are right. Maybe the onlooker sees the game more clearly than the onlooker." Lu Yanqing faintly sighed and said, "So, I think Bai Changchun is merciful and compassionate. He saved the lives of the majority of the people in the world, but he is willing to bear the infamy behind his back. In fact, he does not care about the infamy behind his back. He is not the kind of person who acts for fame and profit. Compared to the people he saved, my Spirit Fang Valley can only be regarded as doing a good deed at most, but we have received the praise of the people in the world. But then again, although I admire his breadth of mind, I do not approve of his iron-blooded methods in the process of doing things. With his cultivation, there is no need to kill to stop killing. He could have done it more tactfully. There's no need to kill so many people." When Lanfeng's heart was suddenly enlightened, he understood that Lu Yanqing only admired Bai Changchun and did not really like him. But there were some things that he did not want to argue with Lu Yanqing. Although the onlooker knew some things better than the people in the game, there were also some things that he did not know. Now that he thought about it, if Bai Changchun did not use iron-blooded methods, who in the cultivation world would be afraid of him, relying on words to reason, who would listen to him when faced with benefits? He was afraid that Bai Changchun would not be able to deter them even if he wanted to. In the end, more people might die. So, Bai Changchun is not the man you like. When Lan Feng had regained his calmness, he pondered and said, "But what I want to know is, what kind of man do you like? I want to look in the mirror and see how far I am." Before answering your question, I want to ask you a question. Lu Yanqing turned around and stared at him solemnly without blinking and asked, "You said before that you could not face me with the mentality of a friend. Is it because of my appearance?" When Lan Feng was speechless. The reason why he could not face Lu Yanqing with the mentality of a friend was not because of his appearance, but because he really liked Lu Yanqing. After so many years of effort, he could not convince himself to let it go. But he did not deny that Lu Yanqing's peerless appearance was one of the reasons, because every time he saw her, his heart would palpitate. How could he be a friend? If you don't speak, then you admit it. Lu Yanqing sighed faintly and turned to look into the distance again. With a trace of melancholy in her eyes, she slowly said, "Sometimes I hate my appearance, but it also makes me understand what I need. In fact, I am not aloof or narcissistic. No matter how beautiful I am essentially an ordinary woman. I don't have high requirements for the man I like. It can even be said that I have no requirements." No requirements? When Lan Feng could not believe it and said, "Then what are you waiting for?" Lu Yanqing smiled faintly and said, "If I have to say that I have requirements, I just hope that he can treat me as an ordinary woman. He can face me calmly and let me know that I am not the so-called first beauty in the world, but an ordinary woman. I don't care how rich he is, or how handsome he is, or how high his cultivation is, or how noble his status is. I don't even care if he's a good person or a bad person. I just want to be like an ordinary woman and find a man who can make my heart palpitate, a man who can make me give everything. Is this request really too much?" Chapter 673. This request is not too much. When Lan Feng said this, it was hard to tell whether he was crying or laughing. But in his heart, he was asking, "But who knows how high the hurdle in your heart is? Who can make your heart palpitate? There is no standard for your request at all. It's pointless for me to ask. I want to ask, is there anyone who can make your heart palpitate right now?" When Lan Feng's expression was a little lonely because he knew he was not the person who could make her heart palpitate. She had already indirectly told him. Lu Yanqing pondered for a while, then shook her head and said, "If there is, you will know. That is to say, I still have a chance." When Lan Feng looked up at the sky and laughed, somewhat self-deprecatingly. "Why do you have to do this?" Lu Yanqing sighed and said, "Since your cultivation is only a step away from ascending to the immortal realm, why not concentrate on cultivation and ascend to the immortal realm as soon as possible?" Immortal body? Even the underworld envoys died in the hands of Bai Changchun. Presumably the immortal realm is not much better. Besides, when Lan Feng turned to stare at Lu Yanqing and said word by word, "To be able to protect you forever is my greatest wish. What if I can't see you again after ascending to the immortal realm? Instead of worrying about being separated by two worlds, it is better to stay in the human world. At least when I want to see you, I can still see you. If you encounter any trouble, even if I can't help, I can still do what I can." It was the first time Lu Yanqing heard such a naked and undisguised confession from Lan Feng. Even her heart of stone could not help but be moved. In the end, she restrained her emotions and sighed faintly again and said, "Why do you have to do this?" "Huh." When Lan Feng let out a hearty laugh, as if he had relaxed a lot after saying what was in his heart. He pointed to the abode at the foot of the mountain and changed the topic. "It seems that the two women arranged by Yu Qianqiu are good in nature. They can lower themselves to do odd jobs. Not bad, not bad." Lu Yanqing stared at him silently for a while. When she heard him mention Yu Qianqiu, she frowned and asked, "I have something I want to verify with you. I hope you can tell me the truth." When Lan Feng turned around in surprise and asked, "What's the matter? Is Yu Qianqiu a disciple of Bai Changchun?" Lu Yanqing asked. When Lan Feng was stunned and asked in surprise, not many people know about this. How did you know? Did Nongzhu tell you? So my guess is correct. Lu Yin gave a rare cold snort and said, no one told me, but I accidentally found out that Niu Yud is Yu Qianshou in disguise, plus a few things linked together. I guess that Yu Qianshou and Bai Chongqun have a relationship, but I don't dare to confirm that he is Bai Chongqun's disciple. I know you also know the secret. Otherwise, you wouldn't support him time and time again. I can't imagine that Bai Chongqun, who has been arrogant all his life, has taught a deceitful disciple who uses fake pills to harm people and cheat money. Niu Yud is Yu Qianshou in disguise. When Lan Feng was shocked, Lu Yanqing asked with some astonishment, don't you know? I really don't know about this. When Lan Feng did not doubt Lu Yanqing's words at all. He frowned and pondered. It seems that Nongzhu also knows about this. No wonder Yu Qianshou and Niu Yud are familiar. It turns out that they are the same person. What does Yu Qianshou want to do? He is too reckless. His gaze swept past the abode below, and he immediately narrowed his eyes. He pointed at it and said, if that's the case, then Yin Yu of the Sleeping Spring Loft is his. Reckless. This kid is simply messing around. Too outrageous. How could Bai Chongqun accept such a person as a disciple? Is there any reason why Yu Qianshou did this? Lu Yanqing asked. I don't know. When Lan Feng said in a low voice, I have to go back and send a message to Nongzhu to see if Bai Chongqun knows about this. If this boy is fooling around behind Bai Chongqun's back, it is simply ruining Bai Chongqun's wisdom. Bai Chongqun must discipline him well. Otherwise, with this boy's cultivation at such a young age, once Bai Chongqun leaves, there will be a big scum in the cultivation world. Then he looked at Lu Yanqing and said, Niu Yud and Yu Qianshou have not stopped. This matter cannot be delayed. If it is too late, who knows what this boy will do to harm people. I will go back first. Lu Yanqing nodded and watched when Lan Feng quickly fly into the sky. On a hill behind a medicine hut, Exine Laosan, who was hiding in a tree, saw when Lan Feng leave and immediately rushed to the foot of the mountain. He landed at the foot of the mountain and looked around for a while. After confirming that there was no one, he quickly pushed aside a pile of weeds beside him and saw 3 unconscious young girls lying inside. Looking at their simple and shabby clothes, they were obviously farm girls. Without hesitation, Exine Laosan carried them on his shoulder and quickly sneaked into the depths of the mountain with the 3 girls. He was exceptionally careful along the way. He arrived at the foot of an inconspicuous hill in the depths of the mountain and stopped beside a huge rock that was embedded in the mountain. He looked around vigilantly once again and suddenly scuttled into the underbrush under the huge rock. He carried the 3 women and disappeared into the underbrush together. If one was not familiar with the terrain here, who would have thought that there was a cave behind the grass? The passage leading to the cave was not smooth. In the darkness, there were abrupt stones sticking out. However, Exine Laosan was obviously very familiar with this place. He easily brought the 3 girls to the innermost part. The space inside the cave was not big, at most 4 or 5 rooms. However, it was filled with fluorescent stones to drive away the darkness. It was very bright, at least reaching the level of ordinary lighting. Only a few large boulders that were erected were dim, giving people a kind of unfathomable feeling. Exine Laosan directly threw the people he brought into the ground. He looked around, but did not see Yin Jueisheng's figure. His eyes looked towards the shadows behind the boulders. Sure enough, after a while, Yin Jueisheng flashed out from behind a boulder at the edge like a ghost. Yin Jueisheng also appeared very careful. His eyes glowed with a demonic red light. After glancing at the passage where they came in, he asked, "Did you encounter anything unusual on the way here?" Exine Laosan respectfully replied, "Rest assured, master. Generally, people in the cultivation world will not trespass into the territory of Lingfang Valley. It is also very difficult for people in the secular world to break into this place. I was very careful on the way here and did not find anything unusual." "What about that one Lan Feng? Is he still in Lingfang Valley?" "No. I came here after seeing him leave with my own eyes." Yin Jueisheng nodded his head and felt slightly relieved. He had no choice but to be so cautious. Now that he had become the target of everyone in the cultivation world, it would be difficult for him to get rid of them with his current cultivation. If he was targeted by a spirit-severing expert, there was basically no hope of escape. For the sake of safety, he decided not to contact Bing Qingzi or anyone else for the time being, because he could not afford to fail again. And Lingfang Valley, this ungoverned area, became the best place for him to take refuge. Who would have thought that he would hide in Lu Yanqing's Lingfang Valley? Yan Zhuixing glanced at the 3 young girls on the ground and frowned. Why are there only 3? I don't know if I can succeed with just these. I still need 49 more in the future. If you go on like this, how long will I have to wait? As he waved his hand, the sound of staggering footsteps came from behind a few large rocks. 5 silly girls walked out from the shadows as if they were sleepwalking. Xian Laosan said in fear, "Master, please calm down. There are really not many families in the periphery of Lingfang Valley. Moreover, Master only needs virgins with a body of pure yin, so it is more time-consuming to find them. If it is an ordinary woman, it should be easier to find. Can you?" "No." Yan Zhuixing refused flatly. "You can only find virgins. Women who have lost their chastity cannot be wanted. Blood demon flower needs pure yin blood to be nourished. Blood that has lost yin qi will greatly reduce the magical effect of blood demon flower." Xian Laosan quickly agreed. Yes. I will increase the search efforts in the vicinity of Lingfang Valley and try to gather enough people for Master as soon as possible." Yan Zhuixing just showed a satisfied expression, but his eyes flickered as if he thought of something. He waved his hand and said, "From today onwards, you can't do anything near Lingfang Valley. Otherwise, it will cause suspicion sooner or later. Try to go as far as possible and search in the territory of the 3 countries. Remember, it is best to find the daughters of poor families. Such families will not make much noise if there are only a few people. Don't touch those who are rich or powerful. Such families will have a greater impact if they lose face than ordinary people. If you make a big noise, it will cause suspicion sooner or later. Also, don't do it in one place. It will also easily cause suspicion." "I will remember. But in that case, I am afraid that in terms of time." Xian Laosan seemed to be in a dilemma. Yan Zhuixing knew what he wanted to say and sighed helplessly. "Alas, if it is slow, then so be it. At this point, I don't mind waiting for a few more days. The most important thing is safety first. We can't let anyone find out." "I understand," Xian Laosan said respectfully. Yan Zhuixing looked at the 3 unconscious girls on the ground, and then looked at the 5 people behind him. He muttered to himself, "There are 8 people now. I could try to use the great method to mature the blood demon flower and see if it will succeed." He nodded and waved to Xian Laosan. "Go and guard the cave entrance. Don't let anyone or beast come in and disturb us." Unexpectedly, Xian Laosan said hesitantly, "Master, there is something about the 7-star blood orchid. I don't know if I should say it or not." "Oh." Yan Zhuixing suddenly turned around and asked curiously, "You know about the 7-star blood orchid? Why don't you tell me about it?" "Yes." Xian Laosan bowed slightly and said, "Before coming, I saw Master playing with the 7-star blood orchid with my own eyes. There were more than 10 pots." 10 pots of 7-star blood orchid? Yan Zhuixing's eyes lit up. He asked urgently in a louder voice, "Are you sure you saw it correctly?" Chapter 674. It should be right. It is very similar to the blood orchid in Master's hands, but is more lush, and each pot has 7 small white flowers and exudes a faint smell of blood. My master also said that it is the 7-star blood orchid brought back from the cornucopia. Xian Laosan said, "Then it should be right." "Hey, is what Yu Qianqiu said true?" Yan Zhuixing muttered. He remembered that Yu Qianqiu said in the cornucopia that he sold the 10 pots of blood orchid to someone else. At that time, he thought that Yu Qianqiu was lying. He didn't expect it to be true, and he didn't expect it to be sold to Lu Yanqing. If Master needs, this subordinate will find a way to steal the 10 pots of blood orchid. Xian Laosan flattered. Yin Juexing hesitated and shook his head. He raised his hand and said, "Don't act rashly. A little impatience will spoil a great plan. Although I really want the 10 pots of mature blood orchid, is not the time. Once the 10 pots of blood orchid of your master are stolen, and Yu Qianqiu revealed the truth to me, it is inevitable that someone will suspect me. For safety reasons, you must not touch the 10 pots of blood orchid of your master, at least not for the time being." This subordinate understands. Xian Laosen bowed slightly. Yin Juexing waved his hand and said, "Set up a soundproof enchantment at the entrance of the cave, and guard it well." The former obeyed and quickly rushed to the entrance of the cave to set up, and then hid in the cave behind the grass to guard against people breaking in. Inside the cave, Yin Juexing flicked his fingers and shot 3 black lights directly at the 3 young women on the ground. The 3 women woke up from their coma one after another. The person who woke up first realized that he was lying on the ground. He hurriedly got up and looked at his surroundings. He was so scared that he let out an ear-piercing scream. His voice echoed in the cave. She didn't know what happened and how she suddenly appeared in a cave. In some dim light, a good-looking but expressionless man was staring at her indifferently. Behind the man were 5 girls with dull expressions, and the atmosphere was extremely frightening. The most terrifying thing was that beside her, there were 2 figures struggling to get up. The strange scene was beyond her imagination, and she subconsciously let out a terrified scream. Yin Juexing's eyes suddenly glowed with a demonic red light, penetrating the other party's mind and cutting off the scream halfway. As soon as the other 2 girls raised their heads, their eyes met with a pair of glowing red eyes. The fear on their faces immediately turned into a sluggish expression. The bewitching red light disappeared. Yin Juexing's cold eyes quickly swept across the eyes of the 8 young girls. Silly smiles appeared on the faces of the 8 young girls. They raised their hands and slowly undressed themselves. Yin Juexing was not interested in the girls undressing in front of him at all. He took out the 7 pots of immature 7-star blood orchids from his storage bag and carefully took out the blood orchids by their roots from the soil in the flower pots. He gently patted off a large piece of soil on the roots. A naked young girl walked in front of him and stretched out her hands, revealing a pleading expression. Yin Juexing stretched out a finger, and his fingertips glowed with black light. He directly cut the girl's wrists, and blood immediately gurgled out. The girl didn't seem to feel a trace of pain. Instead, she showed a satisfied expression. She took the blood orchids from Yin Juexing and carefully held the roots. She crossed her fingers to form a bowl shape and hugged the blood orchids on the flat lower abdomen under her navel. The blood flowing out of her wrists immediately flowed into her clasped palms, nourishing the roots of the blood orchids. 7 blood orchids were held on the abdomen by the 7 girls in a row. There was still a girl who walked over foolishly and stretched out her hands. Yin Juexing glanced at the 7 of them and said indifferently to the girl, "You step aside first. If there is any accident, I will use you as a substitute." The girl immediately stepped back obediently. Yin Juexing walked to the center of the cave and clapped his hands. The 7 girls holding the blood orchids immediately walked over and stood in a circle surrounding him in the middle. Yin Juexing looked around at the naked bodies of the 7 young girls. No matter how tempting they were, he couldn't see any lust in his cold eyes. He silently looked at the wounds on the wrists of the 7 girls. Blood almost soaked the roots of the blood orchids in his clasped palms. Yin Juexing slowly closed his eyes and made a messy and complicated gesture with his hands. Black mist slowly emerged from his body and lingered around him. The extremely strange scene didn't last long. Suddenly, he let out a muffled hum. 7 shining red bloodlines drilled out of his nostrils and circled around his body like spiritual snakes. The lingering black mist quickly rushed to the 7 shining red bloodlines. In a blink of an eye, they turned into 7 dancing black snakes and circled around the top of the cave. There was a red light shining on the snake's head. It was the glowing bloodlines entrenched in it. "Open your mouth." Yin Juexing let out a soft shout and opened his cold eyes. The 7 girls quickly opened their mouths. The 7 black snakes that were flying in the air seemed to have found their home in an instant. They swung their tails and swooped down from the top of the cave, drilling into the mouths of the 7 girls. As soon as the 7 girls closed their mouths, they couldn't help but let out a painful, muffled groan. The expressions on their faces changed rapidly. The blue veins on their necks and foreheads bulged. Their eyeballs protruded as if they were going to jump out of their sockets. Their naked bodies trembled uncontrollably. Obviously, they were suffering from unbearable pain. Yan Zhuixing simply ignored the unbearable pain of the 7 girls. His figure flashed quickly. He stretched out 2 fingers of his right hand like a dragonfly, skimming the water. He dipped the blood on one of the girl's hands and quickly drew a pentagonal star pattern on the girl's forehead. After he was done, he turned around and waved the 2 fingers of his right hand. Soon, he used the blood of the 7 girls to draw a pentagonal star pattern on each of their foreheads. After doing this, Yan Zhuixing quietly closed his eyes and pondered for a while. Then, he slowly knelt down on one knee piously. He pressed the finger that was stained with the blood of the 7 girls on his forehead. He pressed it heavily and drew a bright vertical mark from the center of his forehead to between his eyebrows. It was as if he had grown a 3rd eye. Yan Zhuixing knelt on one knee in the middle of the 7 naked girls. He put his palms together and pressed them on his chest. He lowered his head and chanted piously. The 7 girls seemed to have a telepathic connection with him. They chanted in unison, "Ancient existence, a supreme demon god, please listen to the humble pleas of your incomparably loyal people. Almighty demon god, please open your incomparably broad chest and bestow power to your people who worship you piously. Let the blooming blood demon flower praise your greatness and wisdom." The voices of the 8 people reverberated in the cave, creating layers of sound waves. After he finished reciting those words, a black light suddenly appeared above Yan Zhuixing's head, revolving between the 7 girls. The cave immediately became deathly still. The sounds that were originally reverberating in the cave were suppressed by a desolate and ancient aura the moment the black light appeared. The desolate and ancient aura spread out from the rotating black light. The rotating black light gradually rotated from the size of a bean to the size of a round table. Then it stopped expanding. The black light became denser and denser. Suddenly, it flashed and split into 2. The 2 black lights seemed to be brewing and floated. After a while, it actually formed 2 huge eyes. This pair of transformed eyes were like the eyes of a real person. Every frown and movement was bright and full of unquestionable majesty. Although it looked like a real person's eyes, it did not look like a human's eyes. Because it was too cold, there was not a trace of emotion in it. It was even more cold and emotionless than Yan Zhuixing's cold eyes. Inside the cave, there was a desolate, ancient, and incomparably awe-inspiring majestic aura. This caused 3rd Brother Exion, who was guarding the cave entrance, to be endlessly shocked. He couldn't resist and knelt down towards the cave entrance. If it wasn't for the fact that the majestic aura had been intentionally restrained, such an awe-inspiring aura would probably have been sensed by everyone in Spirit Fragrance Valley the moment it rushed out of the cave. That was a kind of unquestionable majestic aura that didn't need to be shown. Yan Zhuixing seemed to be accepting the judgment of fate. He closed his eyes and slowly raised his head to face the sky with a pious expression. The 2 slender and cold huge eyes slowly stared at Yan Zhuixing, who was kneeling with his head held high. Yan Zhuixing immediately felt a strong pressure wrapping around him. He did not even have the strength to lift a finger. It was as if his whole body was going to be crushed into powder in an instant. Suddenly, a black light shot out from the 2 huge eyes and directly entered the blood-red vertical scar on Yan Zhuixing's forehead. The blood-red vertical scar instantly became alive. The red light overflowed and shone, as if a 3rd eye was really going to grow on his forehead. After the cold and huge eyes finished doing this, they gradually dispersed into a rotating black light. They gradually shrank, as if they were going to disappear. Suddenly, the shrinking black light paused for a moment, then began to expand again, turning into a pair of huge eyes. The cold eyes seemed to have a little bit of humanity. They stared at Yin Zhuixing and actually revealed an expression of contemplation. After a while, it seemed to have thought of something. It once again shot out a black light and wrapped Yin Zhuixing's whole body. After the black light was completely annihilated into Yin Zhuixing's body, the eyes dispersed into a black light again. It rapidly rotated and shrank until it was the size of a bean. Then, it suddenly disappeared. In an instant, the majestic and oppressive desolate and ancient terrifying aura in the cave disappeared without a trace. Only then did Yin Zhuixing dare to open his eyes. He looked around with a hint of excitement and excitement hidden in his eyes. Although he didn't know what had happened just now and was only doing it according to the records in the demonic book, it was the first time he deeply experienced the extraordinariness and power of the great demonic book. Such a powerful aura, too powerful. He didn't expect that casting a spell could actually condense such a powerful aura. Not only did it suppress his body, but it also suppressed his thoughts of resisting. One could tell the whole picture by looking at one spot. The demonic book actually had such power. Once it was mastered, who in the world could stop him? Yin Zhuixing's excited gaze froze. He forcefully stabilized his emotions. He knew that now wasn't the time to think about all sorts of things. A journey of 1,000 miles began with a single step. The way of the king was to do what was in front of him first. With his hands behind his back, he slowly floated into the sky above the cave. The 7 young girls raised their heads. Their gazes followed his figure and looked up at him in a daze. Yin Zhuixing formed complicated hand seals and indifferently spat out word by word. Light of the demon god, shine on the 7 stars. Lowly creatures, under the illumination of the demon god, contribute your lives and let the flower of the blood demon bloom even more brightly. The bloodstain on his forehead that was overflowing with red light immediately attracted the gazes of the 7 young girls. The star-shaped patterns on their foreheads immediately resonated, and there was also a red light circulating on them. Suddenly, the red light on Yin Zhuixing's forehead turned into 7 red light beams and directly shot into the center of the star-shaped patterns on the foreheads of the 7 young girls. The red light on the foreheads of the 7 young girls flashed and disappeared along with the star-shaped patterns on their foreheads. An indescribable expression of pain instantly appeared on the faces of the 7 young girls. Their pale faces that had lost too much blood twisted into a hideous and twisted appearance. Their bodies couldn't stop trembling. The wound on his wrist that had already coagulated into a blood scab suddenly collapsed. Blood gushed out rapidly. What accompanied it was the red light mixed with the fresh blood that flowed continuously towards his closed palms. Once the flowing red light came into contact with the roots of the 7-star blood orchid, the entire blood orchid immediately seemed to be filled with life. The red leaves that were like silk wriggled and grew slowly. The 7 young girls seemed to be unable to bear the pain any longer. They desperately shook their heads and screamed. Her originally bare and smooth skin was rapidly aging at a visible speed, and wrinkles appeared on her skin. The shrill screams couldn't make Yin Zhuixing's ice-cold eyes produce a trace of pity. Even if the screams were extremely miserable, it couldn't make a ripple in his eyes. He was concentrating on the 7 7-star blood orchids that were growing rapidly. The young life was flowing away. The plump breasts that originally belonged to the young girls were gradually withering and shriveling. The youthful faces couldn't help but wrinkle. The black hair on their heads was turning from white to white. The thick smell of blood filled the entire cave. The mournful screams that were gradually weakening gradually became weak. They were actually already awake from the endless pain. Their eyes were flickering with fear. They actually wanted to resist, but they couldn't. There was a powerful force in their bodies that suppressed them to the point that they couldn't resist at all. The young girl standing at the side turned a deaf ear to this. She still had a silly smile on her face, as if everything had nothing to do with her. Yin Zhuixing, who was silently watching everything below, suddenly had his eyes lit up. He saw that the 7 pots of blood orchids that had become incomparably beautiful suddenly blossomed with 7 white spots. The white spots were wriggling and struggling with all their might. They trembled and tried hard to expand. After struggling for a while, the flower buds that could be hugged finally sprang open. The tender red stamen was delicate and beautiful, and the white petals continued to grow. Success. Yin Juexing, who was excited, was suddenly shocked again. If he let it continue to grow, it would bear a blood fruit soon. That wasn't what he wanted. He made a complicated gesture with his fingers. 7 black lights flicked into the wounds on the 7 people's wrists and immediately stopped the almost dried blood from flowing out. Yin Juexing landed among the 7 people. He took out a fully bloomed 7-star blood orchid from one of them. He then took out a flower pot and buried the blood orchid again. After a while, the 7 pots of blood orchids were collected. At this point, Yin Juexing was completely relieved and let out a sigh of relief. He glanced coldly at the 7 people who had turned from young girls to white-haired old women. He suddenly opened his arms, and the 7 people swayed. They couldn't help but open their mouths. The 7 black snakes that were swallowed by them came out of their mouths again. After the 7 black snakes scuttled in the air, Yin Juexing opened his arms and clenched his fists. As his knuckles cracked, the 7 black snakes exploded into a black mist. Yin Juexing opened his mouth and took a deep breath. The black mist was sucked into his mouth like a flowing cloud. The 7 blood vessels that were shining with red light also nimbly drilled into his nostrils. Without the restriction, the 7 people who had turned from young girls to old women could no longer support their bodies. They swayed and fell down one after another. Each of them lay on the ground and stared at Yin Juexing weakly. All of them had a pleading look in their eyes. However, they begged the wrong person. Yin Juexing glanced at them coldly and said expressionlessly, "You don't have much life left. Living is even more painful. Why don't I do a good deed and give you a quick death? In order to thank you for your contributions, I will leave your corpses intact." As he spoke, his body flashed in a circle like a ghost. There were 7 crisp sounds of bones breaking. In the blink of an eye, he stood in the same place and coldly glanced at the 7 people whose heads had already turned a few circles. "Third brother Xian, you can come in," Yin Juexing called out. Third brother Xian immediately came after hearing the news. When he saw the 7 white-haired old women lying on the ground, he couldn't help but be surprised. He didn't know what had happened to turn the 7 young girls into 7 old women. After his pupils shrank, he knew that there were some things he shouldn't ask. He bowed to Yin Juexing and said, "Master, what are your orders?" Yin Juexing said indifferently, "Take care of these 7 corpses. Don't let anyone find them." Third brother Xian respectfully accepted the order and put the corpses into the storage bag without saying anything. If they were alive, they would definitely die after being put into the storage bag. This was because the flesh and blood of living people couldn't adapt to the space in the storage bag. However, if they were dead, then there was no need to worry. They were already dead. "Wait!" Yin Juexing stopped third brother Xian, who was about to leave. He squinted his eyes and said, "I almost forgot something important. Let me ask you, when Lanfeng left, did he take the 2 women that Yu Qianqiu arranged with him?" Third brother Xian respectfully replied, "No, only when Lanfeng left. The 2 women seemed to be staying in Lingfeng Valley for a while. Enchantress of 100 Charms and Yinyu of Sleeping Spring Loft. How did this Yu Qianqiu get involved with Yinyu? Isn't Yinyu Nyoyud's woman?" Yin Juexing muttered to himself for a while, and then sneered, "Be it Yu Qianqiu or Nyoyud, I will settle the score with him sooner or later. Find a suitable opportunity and find a way to bring those 2 women over. Even if it's just to stick a nail in their side, it will be useful sooner or later. Yes, I will find a way to bring them over." Third brother Xian replied, "Be careful. You must do it under the premise of safety. Otherwise, don't act rashly. By the way," Yin Juexing looked at third brother Xian and said with a faint smile, "I heard that you have a few brothers with extraordinary cultivation. Anyway, You can't handle it alone. If there's a suitable opportunity, why don't you bring them to meet me one by one? Chapter 675. Even though Third Xin was controlled, he was still clear-headed and understood what he meant. He bowed and said, "My brothers will be happy to serve Master. Don't disturb your ninth brother who is at the early stage of soul severing, just in case there's a misunderstanding." "Do you understand?" Yin Zhuixing asked. The main reason was that with his current cultivation, the demon I can't control cultivators who have reached soul severing. "I understand. I won't let him know." Third Xin said obediently. Yin Zhuixing nodded with satisfaction, smiled, and asked, "Everyone says your master is the most beautiful woman in the world. I'm also very curious, but I never had the chance to meet her. Why don't you tell me, just how beautiful is your master?" Third Brother Xin was taken aback. "My master is beautiful, and everyone says so. But this subordinate doesn't think she is as beautiful as everyone says. In this subordinate's opinion, my master is a bit scary." "Scary?" Yin Zhuixing was also stunned, then looked at Third Xin like he's looking at a monster, and slowly understood what was going on. No matter how beautiful a woman is, they can't stand seeing each other every day. Maybe in the eyes of others, she's a beauty, but in the eyes of someone like Third Xin who has been with his master for hundreds of years, no matter how beautiful she is, she's just ordinary. Then he thought about himself. His mother by Hua Fairy is also a publicly recognized beauty. To him, she seems to have the beauty of a mother, but he doesn't think she's that beautiful. Instead, when he sees other women, he thinks they're more beautiful. But what he doesn't understand is why Third Xin thinks Lu Yanqing is scary. Could it be that Lu Yanqing has a bad temper and often punishes him? Actually, Yin Zhuixing guessed it right. Third Xin has been the wildest among his brothers since he was young. He often caused trouble, so Lu Yanqing punished him a lot. Over time, Lu Yanqing became the only one who could deal with him. He was scared of Lu Yanqing since he was young, so it would be strange if he wasn't afraid of her. Outside the Garden of Quiet Guest House, Wu Sihai paced around alone for a while. He didn't want to disturb Yu Qianshou, and he also ordered others not to disturb him. Because for the sake of the clan's benefits, he wished for nothing more than for Wu Lixue and Yu Qianshou's relationship to be as intimate as possible. He wished for nothing more than for the two of them to be inseparable. However, he could not withstand the pressure anymore. All the major sects had sent important figures to seek an audience with Yu Qianshou. They urged him several times a day. Everyone was currently waiting for news on Hat Island. Although he didn't know if Yu Qianshou was willing to see them or not, Wu Sihai had no choice. After all, the Wu family still had to deal with the other sects. They couldn't offend them at once. Because Yu Qianshou was afraid that others would not be able to invite him, he had no choice but to do it himself. He hoped that Yu Qianshou would give face to Wu Lixue and casually go out to meet everyone. At least he would be able to account to everyone. After some hesitation, he put his hands behind his back and walked in with a smile on his face. Walking to the quiet guest house, Wu Sihai coughed lightly and said in a clear voice, "Shua." As soon as he finished, he saw two heads poking out from the window upstairs. Yu Qianshou and Wu Lixue looked at each other and jumped down from the window. Wu Lixue smiled and hugged Wu Sihai's arm. "Grandpa, why are you here?" Wu Sihai's eyes paused on the crow on Wu Lixue's shoulder, and surprise flashed. Then he looked at Wu Lixue, who was glowing, and smiled with satisfaction. Finally, he looked at Yu Qianshou. Yu Qianshou cupped his hands and smiled. "Greetings, Patriarch Wu." Because of his master, by Changchun, he was much higher than Wu Sihai in terms of seniority. But because of Wu Lixue, their relationship was messed up, so he called him Patriarch Wu instead of Senior. "It's quiet here, right? If there's anything you're not satisfied with, just say it." Wu Sihai smiled and looked around. These words caused Yu Qianshou's face to redden. Not only was it peaceful, but you even offered your own granddaughter. How could I not be satisfied? He smiled awkwardly. "I'm satisfied. May I know why Patriarch Wu is here?" Wu Sihai didn't answer him, but looked at Wu Lixue. "Sure, your father and mother haven't seen you for a few days. You should go and greet them, lest they worry." Wu Lixue looked at Yu Qianshou as if unwilling to be separated from him. Wu Sihai smiled bitterly in his heart. Girls really leave their husbands. Girls can't stay at home. Yu Qianshou knew that Wu Sihai must have something to say to him alone. So he smiled and said to Wu Lixue, "Greet your parents for me. I'll visit them when I'm free." He said it with a guilty conscience. Was he not free these days? It was just that he slept with their daughter early, and he was afraid that it would be awkward to meet them, so he consciously avoided them. Wu Lixue replied with an "n" and slowly left. There was no one else in the garden, so Wu Sihai sized up the young man in front of him again and couldn't help but sigh. The scum of the cultivation world that was chased by all the sects was now a distinguished guest that all the sects fought to invite. The world was truly like a game of chess, changing constantly. Yu Qianshou saw that Wu Sihai wanted to say something but hesitated, and he more or less guessed the reason for his visit. All the sects had probably sent people to look for him. In fact, this was also the reason why he appeared in the Wu clan in such a high-profile manner, so there was nothing strange about it. He couldn't help but smile. Is Patriarch Wu looking for me? If you have anything to say, just say it. I'm all ears. Wu Sihai smiled bitterly and shook his head. He sighed and said, "Then I won't beat around the bush. All the sects sent people to look for you, and they're all gathered at Hat Island. I know about the grudges between you and them, so my Wu clan doesn't plan to interfere with the matters between you and them. However, everyone can see that you are here, and all the sects came to look for our Wu clan, asking us to pass the message to you. You see, I have no other choice, so I came to look for you." What's wrong with that? Yu Qianshou waved his hand disapprovingly and said, "Just tell them directly that I'm not interested in meeting them, and ask them to scram." Wu Sihai was immediately displeased. This kid was clearly pretending to be ignorant. "I came to look for you personally because I want you to show yourself and not make things difficult for my Wu clan. You actually don't give me face? Since you don't give me face, then don't blame me for relying on my status as Shui-Er's grandfather to take advantage of my seniority." Wu Sihai's face darkened slightly, and he said in a deep voice, "Yu Qianshou, if you want them to scram, that's your business. You should tell them personally. My Wu clan can't afford to be a villain. Even if you don't give me face, you should give Shui-Er face, right? Don't forget that Shui-Er's surname is also Wu. Don't make things difficult for my Wu clan." The old man's temper was rather great. Yu Qianshou was delighted in his heart. He was waiting for Wu Sihai to make things clear so that he could seize the opportunity to do him a favor at little cost. This way, he wouldn't feel guilty for taking advantage of the Wu clan. This way, both parties' mentality would be more balanced. However, on the surface, he wasn't too happy and said, "Since Wu clan head has made things clear, then what else can I say? Even if I don't give anyone face, I can't not give you face. However, they don't have the qualifications to ask me to meet them. After all, I'm not a member of the Cultivation Alliance anymore. It's not their turn to order me around. If they want to meet me, let them come over themselves. This request of mine isn't too much, right?" Wu Sihai pondered for a moment. In the cultivation world, it was about who was stronger. There was no reason to ask the strong to lower their heads to the weak. Yu Qianshou's words weren't too much. Thus, he nodded silently and said, "All right, it's settled then. I'll let them come here." Without saying anything else, he turned around and left. Not long after, there were over 100 people standing in the quiet garden of the quiet guest house. They were all from the top sects in China's cultivation world. There were over 100 people in different attire gathered in front of the building. They stared at Yu Qianshou, who was standing on the stairs with his hands behind his back. For a moment, no one said anything. Even though everyone was mentally prepared, they still didn't feel good when they saw this young man again. There was a saying that the river flows east for 30 years and west for 30 years, but it hadn't even been 30 years, right? That scum that everyone wanted to beat up in the past had appeared in front of everyone again. He had already become the #1 expert below the soul formation stage and was looking at them arrogantly with the attitude of an expert. No matter how hard it was to accept, they had to face reality. In the cultivation world, whoever was strong had the final say. Moreover, all the sects needed his help. so they had no choice but to accept this fact silently. However, the way everyone looked at the people from supporting Immortal Island was a little ridiculous. The person on the stairs could have grown into a pillar of the supporting Immortal Island and shelter it from the wind and rain. In the end, he was chased out of the supporting Immortal Island by them. Now, they were asking for the disciple who was chased out of the sect. If this wasn't a joke, then what was? This was called reaping what he sowed. Yu Qianqiu looked at everyone condescendingly. How could he not be filled with emotions? He thought about the difficulties when he first joined the Kuang-Tsung sect, how he had to hide when he was chased by various sects, and now he was looking at everyone from a high position. Although the ups and downs in the cultivation world were normal, it undoubtedly proved that his hard work over the years hadn't been in vain. He had finally fought for a place in the cultivation world. Most of the people below the stairs had seen him before. Even if he wasn't familiar with them, he had at least met them once. However, what surprised him the most was Qiu Wen naturally represented the 10,000 demons, while Dongfang Chang, Ao, naturally represented the supporting Immortal Island. It seemed like there was someone standing between the two of them who shouldn't be there. It was the principal elder of the supporting Immortal Island's myriad fragrance garden, Ferdinand. Yu Qianqiu's first reaction was that the supporting Immortal Island had already found out about the matter between him and Furong. The purpose of sending Ferdinand here was self-evident. At the same time, the purpose of everyone's visit was also obvious. A group of people who were ignorant and narrow-minded. They suddenly knew how terrifying the outside world was and that they could be devoured at any time. This was related to their own interests, so they couldn't sit still anymore. I heard from the Wu clan's master that all of you are here to look for me. May I know why you are looking for me? Yu Qianqiu asked indifferently with an expressionless face. Chapter 676. Since the silence had been broken, someone had to speak first. The so-called number one sect in the world, Fuxian Island, was about to play its role. Dongfang Chang'ao looked at Yu Qianqiu with a complicated gaze and cupped his fists with difficulty. Yu Qianqiu, you've been roaming around the various countries for many years. I'm sure you know the situation of the Chinese cultivation world better than us. The Chinese cultivation world is now in a precarious situation. The soul formation stage masters of the various countries are like sharp swords hanging above our heads. Once they make a move, the various sects won't be able to fight back at all. Yu Qianqiu frowned. This doesn't seem to have anything to do with me, right? Brother Yu, you can't say that. Qiu also awkwardly cupped his hands and said, no matter what, you are still a part of China's cultivation world. Are you really willing to watch China's cultivation world be destroyed by foreign enemies? I really don't see why you guys are looking for me. If the soul formation stage masters want to make a move, I won't be able to stop them even if I want to. I'm sure you guys know this. Yu Qianqiu continued to play dumb. May I know why so many of you are looking for me? Dongfang Chang, Ao, said righteously. We're here to talk to you on behalf of the Chinese Cultivation Alliance. No matter what, you're a part of the Chinese cultivation world. It's only right for you to stand up in times of crisis. It would have been fine if Yu Qianqiu hadn't said that, but the moment he said that, Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but sneer. Old man Dongfang, how dare you say something like that? When you can't use me, you can't wait to kill me. Now that you're asking me to stand up in times of crisis, you're really reasonable. Oh, so you guys are here on behalf of the Chinese Cultivation Alliance. That's a lot of representatives. Yu Qianqiu seemed to be counting the number of people as he glanced at everyone one by one. It was good to talk to Yu Qianqiu in order to protect the Chinese cultivation world, but no one thought that Yu Qianqiu could protect the entire Chinese cultivation world by himself. However, with his relationship with some soul formation stage masters, it wouldn't be a problem for him to bring one or two top soul formation stage masters over to protect the sect. This was the reason why everyone had gathered here. As for those small sects that were too weak, they knew their limits. They knew that they couldn't compete with those big sects, even if they came. Anyway, there were already enough people representing the Cultivation Alliance on this trip. This made Dongfang Chang'ao a bit embarrassed. Otherwise, he wouldn't have dragged Ferdinand, who was in charge of the spiritual herb garden. Sigh. Although, when the Chinese cultivation world had any benefits, it was all taken by your sects and had nothing to do with me. But at the critical moment, you guys finally thought of me. It's not easy. Yu Qianqiu was full of sarcasm and didn't leave any face. If he said such words in the past, a lot of people would jump out and beat him up. But now, everyone had to listen even if they didn't want to. Strength, determined attitude. But everyone's face had been tested for a long time. They knew what they could listen to and what they could pretend not to hear. Many people lower their heads to look for ants. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the group of people who didn't speak and sneered. Okay, you guys are heartless, but I can't be unjust. Just like Elder Dongfang said, I'm also a member of the Chinese cultivation world. So I promised the Cultivation Alliance that I'm ready to stand up in times of danger, but I can't guarantee that I can help. That's all I have to say. If there's nothing else, you can leave. As soon as he finished speaking, he went back to the building and sat on a rocking chair in the hall, smiling at the people outside. The remaining group of people looked at each other. What was the difference between what Yu Qianqiu said and not saying? If everyone left like this, how could they explain it to the sects when they went back? But he had already agreed to the Cultivation Alliance without hesitation. What excuse could they use to stay? Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting on a rocking chair, closed his eyes gently. One of his favorite things to do was to tear off the disguise of those righteous people who were covered with a sanctimonious veil and slowly enjoy their ugly behavior. The group of people outside looked at Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting on the rocking chair, and all of them gnashed their teeth in hatred. Unfortunately, things were different now, and they couldn't do anything to him. Dongfang Chang'ao was also speechless. His words were blocked by Yu Qianqiu. He represented Fuxian Island, and it was not good for him to do anything in public. He could only transmit his voice to Ferdinand next to him. Elder Ferdinand, it's up to you now. Ferdinand smiled bitterly and helplessly. He braced himself to find an excuse and shouted, Yu Qianqiu, do you still recognize me? His voice attracted everyone's attention. Damn, my dear father-in-law, how are you? Yu Qianqiu was speechless. This Fuxian Island was indeed the #1 sect in the world. The resources in their hands were so rich that they could even bring out his future father-in-law. It couldn't be helped. His future father-in-law was acting, and he had to cooperate. Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting on a rocking chair, suddenly opened his eyes and stared at Ferdinand outside. After looking for a while, he revealed a look of disbelief. He suddenly stood up and strode out of the door. He said in surprise, Are you Elder Fei of Wanfeng Garden? Ha, that's me. I didn't expect Yu Qianqiu to still remember me, Ferdinand said with a smile. It's really Elder Fei. I thought I saw her wrongly just now. Back then in Fuxian Island, Elder Fei had always taken care of me, and I will never forget it. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand and led the way into the house. He said with a smile, I haven't seen Elder Fei for a long time. It's a good time to catch up. Please come in. Ferdinand followed him into the house with a smile. Everyone watched the two of them disappear in the hall. There were not many people who knew about the relationship between Yu Qianqiu and Furong, even in Fuxian Island. It should be known that this was an important secret of Fuxian Island that was strictly guarded, and only some of the higher-ups knew about it. Dongfang Chang'ao, who knew about it, was completely speechless when he saw the two of them acting. It really looked like that was the case. Zhou silently turned around and stared at Dongfang Chang'ao. He said, through telepathy, Brother Dongfang, it seems that the relationship between Elder Fei and Yu Qianqiu is not ordinary. Fuxian Island is really not comparable to ordinary sections. They even dug out the principal elder of Wanfeng Garden, who rarely leaves the island. They really put in a lot of effort. Not only Qiu Yuan, but the others also stared at Dongfang Chang'ao with jealousy in their eyes. Dongfang Chang'ao was too lazy to say anything more. He didn't want to stay here anymore. Anyway, he couldn't solve any problem by staying here. Everything depended on Ferdinand. He then turned around and walked out of the crowd on the upper floor of the quiet guest house. Yu Qianqiu casually set up a soundproof enchantment. Ferdinand, who was beside him, saw his action and nodded. He said, It seems that the rumor is right. Your cultivation has indeed reached the tribulation stage. Your progress is amazing. Yu Qianqiu turned around and said with a smile, Fuxian Island used you as a lobbyist. How are you going to convince me? I don't need to be secretive with you. Fernand was silent for a while before he said with a solemn expression, This time, the supporting Immortal Island has shown great sincerity. If you're willing to return to the supporting Immortal Island, after a discussion within the sect, we'll give you the position of the chief elder of the supporting Immortal Island. In other words, once the current sect leader retires, you will take over the position of the sect leader of Fuxian Island if there are no major accidents. I think this condition is very good. You can really consider it seriously. Chapter 677. Yu Qianqiu was not in a hurry to reply to him. He smiled and asked him to sit down first. He also sat beside him with a smile and did not speak. There was a tea table between the two of them. There was no tea on the tea table, but Yu Qianqiu took out a pot of good wine as tea. He poured a cup for Ferdinand and said, This wine is not ordinary. It is the 100-fruit wine given by a monster king in the monster domain. There are not many people in the cultivation world who can drink it. Try this wine and see how it tastes. Although Ferdinand did not know his real identity in the monster domain, he knew that he had a relationship with the ghost general in the monster domain. So, what he said must be true. He did not stand on ceremony with him. He picked up the wine cup and drank it. The cool wine that moistened his mouth slid into his stomach. Immediately, a warm feeling surged and spread to his limbs and bones. His whole body was refreshed, and the fragrance lingered in his mouth. Ferdinand smacked his lips and nodded. It is indeed a good wine. Yu Qianqiu smiled and filled his cup again. Ferdinand stared at his action with a gratified look on his face. He asked, What I said just now, have you considered it? It's rare to see you. Why you talk to me about business as soon as we meet? Yu Qianqiu joked. I thought you would ask about Furong first. We will talk about Furong later. Ferdinand sighed and said, The supporting Immortal Island is still waiting for my reply. If I don't clear up your matter first, my heart will also be in a mess. The entire higher-ups of the supporting Immortal Island have high hopes for me. I see that you seem to be very anxious. Is this matter important to you? Yu Qianqiu asked. How can it not be important? Since I stepped into the cultivation world, I have always been in the supporting Immortals Island. The supporting Immortals Island is my sect, and it can be said that it is the place where I have taken root in my life. Now that the sect is facing a crisis, how can I turn a blind eye? After Ferdinand finished speaking, he urged, The conditions given to you are already very good, and this is because you used to be a disciple of the supporting Immortals Island. If it were someone else, they would not give such conditions. What do you think? Yu Qianqiu sat upright and said, I originally wanted to get personal with you, but you insisted on talking about official business. Since you insist on doing this, then we'll toss our personal relationship to the side and deal with official business. Ferdinand stared blankly for a moment. Then, his complexion gradually turned somewhat dark as he said in a deep voice, Don't play this game with me. Put away your evil thoughts. If I really wanted to talk business with you, supporting Immortal Island wouldn't have asked me to talk to you. Yu Qianqiu chuckled and slumped down again. He leaned back on the chair and smiled lazily. All right, I don't dare to make you unhappy. Let's have a discussion that's both public and private. What do you think? At least you know what's good for you. Ferdinand snorted coldly. Since it's not all business, I'll have to rely on our personal relationship to get some insider information first. Yu Qianqiu asked sneakily, As far as I know, the supporting Immortals Island is also divided into factions fighting for power. It's not as calm as it looks on the surface. The chief elder is such an important position, and it's related to the candidate for the next sect leader. It's the biggest piece of fat meat. How can they be willing to give it to an outsider like me? Ferdinand paused and explained, Isn't it a critical juncture now? We're not 3-year-old children. We're all people who know the big picture. Naturally, we have to get through the difficulties together. Yu Qianqiu made a long, non-committally with a sneer on his face. The more people there were in a sect, especially the sects that were divided into factions, the more people would fight for a higher position. Things like knowing the big picture and getting through the difficulties together were nonsense. Some people who were blinded by greed would often not think about knowing the big picture unless they were at the point of death. As the saying goes, when the forest is big, there are all kinds of birds. Yu Qianzhou did not believe that the opinions of so many people in the supporting Immortals Island could be so unified. He said expressionlessly, "No wonder the supporting Immortals Island can become the #1 sect in the world." He was too lazy to finish his words. If Ferdinand was not stupid, he would naturally understand. Sure enough, Ferdinand smiled bitterly. He knew that this guy had a problem with his dishonesty. He sighed and said, "Hibiscus showed up in the cornucopia and was recognized by the people sent by the supporting Immortals Island. When the news came back, it's not a big deal to let Hibiscus leave the supporting Immortals Island without permission with my identity as the principal elder of the Wanfen Garden. But when I left the Chinese cultivation world, many people found an excuse, including the sect leader Feng Xiangtian. They all blamed me. When they were discussing how to punish me, it was Aunt Gio who stood up and helped me out." "Ma Gio?" Yu Qianzhou raised his brows and said in a low voice, "Could it be that me returning to the supporting Immortals Island to be the chief elder is related to Aunt Gio?" Ferdinand showed a look of approval. He thought that this guy's keen perception of people and matters was really not something an ordinary person could compare to. He nodded and said, "Apart from Aunt Gio, who else would dare to say that to you, to be the chief elder of the supporting Immortals Island?" Naturally, many people objected, but you also know the power of the Guan clan in the supporting Immortals Island. Once Aunt Gio spoke, the Guan clan's power naturally gave their full support. After that, Aunt Gio personally mentioned me and asked me to pull you back to the supporting Immortals Island. That's roughly what happened. Yu Qianzhou sneered. Sure enough, people become shrewd with age. This Ma Gio really had a good plan. Back when he was on the supporting Immortals Island, she tried to pull him back, but he refused, saying that he already had a master and that he was an expert in the demon domain. Now, it seemed that the Chinese cultivation world had also begun to spy on various countries. She probably guessed that his master was the world's #1 expert in the demon domain, so she didn't hesitate to pull him back. He had already refused Ma Gio once, so she knew that ordinary people couldn't persuade him. Coincidentally, Furong's matter was exposed. When everyone wanted to punish Ferdinand, Ma Gio came forward to protect Ferdinand, using the carrot and stick method to force Ferdinand to find him. Probably even Ferdinand himself didn't know the reason, so he must be thinking about how to repay Ma Gio. Yu Qianzhou's expression gradually turned cold, and he said in a deep voice, "I don't dare to be the chief elder of the supporting Immortals Island. You can go back and tell Ma Gio that I thank her for her kindness. There's one more thing. I'll have to trouble you to pass on to Ma Gio." Seeing that he flatly refused to go back to the supporting Immortals Island, Ferdinand's expression turned somewhat unsightly. He pulled a long face and said, "Is there anything you want me to tell her?" "I have a friend in the secular world," Yu Qianzhou said indifferently. "He's the pillar general of the Hua Xia Empire, named Shi Wenguang. Due to the persecution of the Li dynasty, he had no choice but to gather an army. Recently, he decided to command the army and overthrow the tyranny of the Li dynasty. I'm in favor of this matter. I hope Elder Fei can tell this to Ma Gio after you go back. I believe she will understand what I mean and make appropriate arrangements." Chapter 678. Hearing that, Ferdinand couldn't sit still anymore. He stood up and shouted, "Yu Qianzhou, what are you trying to do?" The imperial power of the Huaxia Empire was the exclusive property of Fu Xian Island, and the benefits were self-evident. Any disciple of Fu Xian Island could do anything within the borders of the Huaxia Empire with just a word. Anything that happened in the secular world could be settled with just a word. At the same time, the imperial power of the Li clan acted as the eyes of Fu Xian Island in the secular world. Many corners that even cultivators couldn't reach, Fu Xian Island had ways to keep an eye on them. This was the benefit of holding the imperial power hostage. Most importantly, the people of China could let Fu Xian Island pick the best disciple. and they had the first pick condition compared to other sections. Don't underestimate this benefit. This was the foundation that maintained the prosperity of Fuxian Island. As long as there were successors, there was no need to worry about there being no new talents rising. Now that Yu Qianzhou actually said that he wanted to overthrow the imperial power of China, how could Ferdinand not know the consequences of this, as he was also a high-level figure of Fuxian Island? Huh, why are you making such a fuss? Yu Qianzhou smiled disapprovingly. It's a matter of course for the emperor to take turns. It doesn't make sense for anyone to be the emperor forever. Don't be anxious. It's useless even if you're anxious. You can't make the decision anyway. Just pass the message to Ma Jiugu. Let the people who should worry about it worry. Ferdinand said angrily, "You are taking advantage of the precarious situation of the sects to threaten Fuxian Island." "I definitely don't mean to threaten." Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and drank the wine in front of him. He played with the wine cup and said indifferently, "Didn't you say that cultivators can't intervene in the secular world affairs? If the secular people want to fight for the world, let them fight. Who wins and who loses depends on their own ability. We shouldn't intervene. But then again, if someone interferes, don't blame me for being impolite." Ferdinand stared at him with flickering eyes. Suddenly, he sneered and said, "Yu Qianzhou, I really didn't expect you to have such a big ambition. You actually set your sights on the whole world. I just don't understand. Isn't it better for you to join supporting Immortal Island? If I become the sect master of supporting Immortal Island one day, wouldn't it be easier for me to take over the entire world?" "One day," Yu Qianzhou sneered, "if I say that my ambition is not for the whole world, but for the people of the world, will you believe me?" "Full of loopholes," Ferdinand said sarcastically. "Once the war comes, how many people will lose their families and break up their families? Is this what you mean by caring for the common people?" "Yes, you're right. But I don't think this is a reason for the cultivation world to interfere with the secular world." Yu Qianzhou stood up, looked out of the window, and said slowly, "A short pain is better than a long one. It's difficult to change the world without killing people." He turned around and said to Ferdinand, "Who can guarantee that they will always be in power? If the descendants of Furong and I are reduced to the level of ordinary people one day, they will live under layers of oppression and want to resist, but because of the cultivation world's intervention, they will never be able to stand up, and their descendants will be oppressed forever without a chance to resist. Do you still think it's right for the cultivation world to control the power of the secular world for their own interests?" Ferdinand's expression changed slightly. The situation Yu Qianzhou said was not impossible, but very likely. After all, not everyone's descendants had the aptitude for cultivation. Take supporting Immortal Island, for example. There are also descendants of elders who were reduced to ordinary people. When the elders were alive, they could take care of them. But once they died for many years, who would care about them? Yu Qianzhou continued with a smile. "The matters of our descendants are too far away, and we can't make arrangements for our descendants in the future. Whether they are poor or rich, noble or humble, they need to rely on their own efforts to get rid of and fight for it. But the strong intervention of the cultivation world has made many ordinary people have no chance to change their fate. The emperor's family is at the bottom, and the country is made of iron, so he can do whatever he wants to the ordinary people. To the common people, the cultivation world was an unreasonable existence. So I think that the cultivation world is the cultivation world, and the secular world is the secular world, and the two are absolutely not allowed to mix together." Ferdinand was silent, and the room became quiet. Yu Qianzhou looked at him with a smile. After a long time, Ferdinand asked in a deep voice, "What you just said is your real opinion?" Yu Qianzhou said with a smile, "I admit that I'm not such a noble person, so it's still too early to make a conclusion about whether it's true or false. You might as well wait and see it with your own eyes." Ferdinand stared at the grinning Yu Qianzhou with a burning gaze for a while before he suddenly sighed and said, "My ability is limited, so I can't change anything. But remember to treat Furong well, or else I'll curse you forever." After saying that, he removed the soundproof enchantment laid by Yu Qianzhou and strode away. Yu Qianqiu followed him with a grin and said, "I'll send you off." Ferdinand suddenly turned around and said in a deep voice, "The wine just now was really bad. It's bitter. Do you have any more? Let me take some back to drink." Yu Qianqiu stared blankly for a moment before he nodded repeatedly and said, "Yes, yes, yes." Then, he took out more than a dozen jars in a row. Ferdinand also didn't stand on ceremony. He took all of them and left resolutely. Yu Qianqiu followed behind him eagerly. The group of people downstairs had yet to disperse. When they saw the two of them going downstairs, they saw Yu Qianqiu send the gloomy Ferdinand directly to the garden of the quiet guest house. Looking at Ferdinand leaving, Yu Qianqiu shook his head slightly. He knew that the old guy would definitely bear a lot of pressure when he went back. At least, he couldn't avoid some people's accusations. However, some things were like this. If one wanted to succeed, there would always be many people who would sacrifice for it. After returning to the courtyard, he glanced at the crowd and walked directly into the building as if he didn't see anything. When he passed by Qiu Weiyuan finally couldn't help but shout, "Brother Yu, please wait." Yu Qianqiu stopped and looked at him with a smile. "Brother Qiu, what's the matter? Let's talk about it upstairs." He was straightforward, but Qiu Weiyuan didn't expect it to be so simple. He was more or less surprised. When the others saw this, they immediately followed suit and rushed forward, shouting, "Yu Qianqiu, I also have something to talk to you about. I'm here on the order of the sect. Yu Qianqiu, I won't disturb you for too long." Yu Qianqiu glanced at the crowd coldly and accidentally found a woman at the back of the crowd who didn't squeeze in. Perhaps because she was a woman, it was inconvenient for her to rub and push with a group of men. She was looking at them anxiously. However, Yu Qianqiu knew this woman. She was Hua Rui of the Moon Clan. "Elder Hua of the Moon Clan, stay. The rest of you can leave. We can talk later," Yu Qianqiu said to the crowd. Hua Rui looked at Yu Qianqiu and nodded happily. After being stunned for a moment, the crowd immediately became restless. They all shouted, "Yu Qianqiu, this is good for you. Yu Qianqiu, let me finish. If you don't scram, I don't mind killing a few of you," Yu Qianqiu shouted with a fierce look. When he said this, the garden immediately quieted down. Everyone looked at each other. Yu Qianqiu was known as the butcher of the cultivation world. It was said that he killed people like flies and never showed mercy. He even killed a few cultivators at the final stage of the tribulation stage. "Do you really think I don't dare to do it?" Yu Qianqiu threatened again. At this point, no one dared to stay to verify the truth of his words. They all left the garden hesitantly. Yu Qianqiu stared at the figures leaving through the gate and snorted. Sometimes, using force was better than talking reason. Then, he nodded at Hua Rui and Qiu Weiyuan, gesturing for them to follow him. The two hurriedly followed him upstairs. The garden finally returned to the peace it deserved. In the room where he talked to Ferdinand, Yu Qianqiu set up a soundproof wizardry barrier again. Qiu Weiyuan and Hua Rui looked at each other in surprise. They both confirmed that Yu Qianqiu's cultivation had indeed broken through to the tribulation stage. The rumor was indeed true. "I know why you are here." Yu Qianqiu was honest. He looked at Qiu Weiyuan and said with a smile, "I can understand the Moon Clan, but the 10,000 demons don't have to be too anxious. Yin Bugui is the son of the previous leader of the 10,000 demons, after all. I think he won't make things difficult for the 10,000 demons. And that Yin Zhuixing, he is very powerful now. He is the disciple of Bing Qingzi, a semi-god realm cultivator. No one in the world dares to disrespect Bing Qingzi. Whoever wants to touch the 10,000 demons will have to think twice." Qiu Weiyuan smiled bitterly. "Yu Qianqiu, I know you have a grudge against senior brother and Yin Bugui, but this is a different matter. The 10,000 demons have nothing to do with them. Besides, you should also know that even if they want to protect the 10,000 demons, they won't be able to. Yin Zhuixing can't even take care of himself. All the countries are sending people to capture him. And my senior brother, Sai. Not long ago, I just got the news that the Wuji Island has been occupied. My senior brother escaped the Wuji Island under the protection of the Ice Palace disciples. His whereabouts are still unknown. Although Yu Qianqiu didn't know the news of the Wuji Island, Yin Bugui's ending was within his expectations. Since all the countries were trying to capture Yin Jueqing, how could the Wuji Island let his father, Yin Buge, make the decision? Even if the Ice Palace wanted to protect him, the Blue Palace and the other major forces wouldn't give them face. It was already a great fortune that Yin Bugue was able to escape. Yu Qinshu looked at the two and smiled. Everyone knows what's going on. There are some things that I'm too embarrassed to say. Let me put it this way. Previously, the supporting Immortal Island promised me that as long as I returned to the island, they would let me be the chief elder of the supporting Immortal Island. But I rejected it. Could it be that the two of you have more favorable conditions than the supporting Immortal Island? The two were slightly shocked. They didn't expect the supporting Immortal Island to be so generous. The chief elder of the supporting Immortal Island was usually the next sect master of the island. Yu Qinshu even rejected this condition. When the two thought about the conditions they brought, they couldn't bring themselves to say it. Although the room was quiet, the atmosphere was a little restless. After waiting for a while, Yu Qinshu smiled. Actually, there are always things in this world that can move people. It just depends on whether it's to your liking. For example, I have some unresolved grudges with the Deluo sect. If someone can help me eradicate the Deluo sect, I think I will definitely repay the kindness. Chapter 679. What? Xiao Weiyuan and Hua Rui couldn't help but exclaim. Yu Qinshu nodded with a smile, but a fierce look flashed in his eyes. Actually, with his current strength, he could go to the Luo sect alone, but it would be difficult to completely wipe them out. Even if he used all his strength, the Luo sect's deep roots wouldn't be easy to deal with. Moreover, who knew how many tribulation-passing experts were hidden among them? Even if they couldn't beat him, they could at least escape, right? If he wanted to wipe out the Luo sect, he couldn't let those experts escape. Otherwise, they could rise again at any time. Such a large-scale operation required an equally large faction to take action. One was the number 1 sect in the demonic path, while the other was number 3 in the righteous path. If the two joined forces, the Luo sect would definitely lose. Actually, Yu Qinshu had thought of asking supporting Immortal Island for help, but they definitely wouldn't be willing. Supporting Immortal Island would rather give up their worldly power than make a move onto Luo sect. Otherwise, not only would it damage the righteous path's strength, but supporting Immortal Island would also lose the right to continue leading the righteous path. Yu Qinshu, what kind of hatred do you have with the Luo sect that you want to wipe them out? Hua Rui asked with a frown. Yu Qinshu's smile turned cold, and he said in a deep voice, "When I first joined on Kuang Tsung, my master died at the hands of the Luo sect. Back then, I swore on my master's corpse that I would avenge him. Is that reason enough?" There was another reason he didn't say, and that was that Shi Wenguang was about to send out his troops. He chose this time to cause trouble for the Luo sect, to cause chaos in China's cultivation world. This was to prevent people from getting too comfortable and increasing the pressure on Shi Wenguang. As long as the cultivation world was stabilized, he had no doubts about Shi Wenguang's ability to fight a war. Only when Shi Wenguang controlled the entire Huaxia Empire would he have more resources for him to prepare for war. Otherwise, the western border wouldn't be able to arm an army to conquer the world. Another thing was that now was the best time to fish in troubled waters. Once Bai Changchun went to the East Holy Land, he would be able to take advantage of the situation. When the various countries' forces arrived, no one could say what the situation would be like. Therefore, now was the perfect time to target the exalted sect. Hua Rui was speechless. Since Yu Qinshu had sworn an oath, it seemed like he was determined to take action against the Daoyuo sect. Xiao Weiyuan's gaze flickered. If it was during normal times when there were no external enemies, this wouldn't be a bad thing for the 10,000 demons. If they could eradicate the forces of the righteous path, the 10,000 demons would be more than willing to do so. But now, it was time for them to deal with a foreign enemy together, so it was a little difficult. I'm afraid we'll be scorned by the entire cultivation world if we make a move against the exalted sect now. Wen looked at Yu Qinshu and snickered. I'm afraid Fuxian Island and their righteous comrades will not just sit back and do nothing, right? It seemed like this guy was more or less tempted. Yu Qianqiu said indifferently. Since when did the 10,000 demons become so timid? If you're really willing to help me, the other problems are not a problem. I'll step forward and settle it. I like to see who wants to go against me. If you're not willing to help me, that's fine too. There will naturally be others who will be more than happy to help. I don't believe that without Butcher Zhang, we'll have to eat pigs with hair on them. Qiu Wen looked at Hua Rui and said hesitantly, "This matter is too big. I'm afraid it's not something the two of us can make the decision." Hua Rui nodded silently. Yu Qianqiu smiled and said, "I'm not counting on the two of you to make the decision. I'll give you 1 day. I'll wait for your reply in 1 day. If you're late, I won't wait." With that said, he lifted his hand and removed the soundproof barrier, sending the guests off. The two of them did not stay and hurriedly left. This matter had to be reported to the sect as soon as possible. Yu Qianqiu walked to the window and watched the two of them leave the garden. After that, he fell into deep thought. Then, he closed the window and disappeared from the room. The capital of the Huaxia Empire was bustling and lively, as usual. On both sides of a quiet street were rows upon rows of luxurious mansions. It showed that the people who could live on this street were all influential people in the capital. However, this grand and tall mansion seemed a little down and out in this luxurious mansion where nobles and nobles gathered. The tall walls were in need of new paint, the tiles were old and in need of renovation. The red paint on the tall vermilion door was peeling. It looked a little shabby and bleak. Who could imagine that the owner of this mansion was the mansion of the pillar of the State General, who had his own army at the western border? Similarly, because the pillar of the State General had his own army, the Sure family did not dare to be too high profile. They allowed the mansion to be worn down and did not whitewash it on the outside. He was afraid that if the color was too bright, it would agitate the emperor, who was already full of suspicions, even more. The neighbors who lived in the surrounding mansions were all officials of the court and were used to the Sure family's low profile. They would at most glance when they passed by, not daring to have any entanglements with the pillar of the State General. Once upon a time, this was a rich and powerful family that many people wanted to curry favor with, but did not have the means to do so. But now, everyone was trying to avoid them, afraid that they would be implicated if they had even the slightest connection with the pillar of the State General. This was because there were countless spies from the court watching this place. If they were not careful, they could become the accomplices of the pillar of the State General. In front of the door, the once bustling traffic had disappeared for many years. Now, all that was left was deserted. Even describing this place as deserted was a little too much. The gatekeeper behind the vermilion door was lying down in the gatehouse and dozing off. There was no need to worry about anyone disturbing him. At this moment, the sound of galloping horses could be heard from outside the door. There was also the sound of a large group of people running. Even the dozing gatekeeper could feel the ground tremble. The gatekeeper suddenly woke up. He was very familiar with this sound. It was the sound that would come from outside when the pillar of the State General or the pillar of the State General returned. Was it the pillar of the State General or the pillar of the State General? The gatekeeper's face lit up. He quickly adjusted his clothes and hat and opened the door impatiently. The first thing he saw was the gleaming swords and spears. The general on horseback had an unfamiliar face. He was neither the pillar of the State General nor the pillar of the State General. He was waving his whip viciously at the two ends of the street and shouted, "Surround this place. Everyone, keep your eyes open. Do not let a single fly out of the general's residence. Anyone who disobeys will be executed." The large group of people split into two sides and surrounded the pillar of the State General's residence like an iron bucket. The gatekeeper's expression changed greatly. He had also heard rumors that the pillar of the State General was going to rebel. Could it be that the pillar of the State General was really going to rebel? The general on the horse glared fiercely at the open door. The gatekeeper was so scared that he slammed the door shut with a bang. He didn't forget to bolt the door shut. He turned around and ran back into the courtyard. As he ran, he shouted, "Not good. Something bad is going to happen. Not good." The general's residence is surrounded by a large group of people. The shouts reverberated throughout the general's residence. The family members and servants, who had been living in fear every day, suddenly rushed out of nowhere. Their faces were pale. The courtyard suddenly seemed to be overcrowded. The mistress, Li Hongyang, walked out from the main hall with her two wives, Bao Wanshi and Si Tuhui. Bao Wanshi was even holding the hand of a curious child. "Madam, not good." The general's residence is surrounded by soldiers. The gatekeeper shouted as he ran towards the main hall. Hearing this, the three women who were already panicking became even more at a loss. Bao Wanshi squatted down immediately. She hugged her son and cried, "I didn't expect this day to come. My poor son." So, a cold light suddenly flashed out of nowhere. The head of the gatekeeper, who had been shouting loudly, was directly separated from his body. Without any warning, it flew into the air and fell into the bushes at the side. Blood spurted out. The headless body fell on the road with a bang. The road was instantly stained with blood. Screams came from all around. Si Tuhui tilted her head to support the tottering Li Hongyang. Bao Wanshi was so scared that she buried her head in her son's chest. The cold light that killed the person returned with a whoosh. A person walked out of the back garden and put away his flying sword. It was none other than Shi Xiaotian. He walked to the front of the main hall expressionlessly. He looked around at the crowd and said in a deep voice, "Anyone who dares to disturb people's morale will be killed without mercy." A group of servants looked at the third young master in disbelief. They were so scared that they were trembling. They didn't expect that the seemingly docile third young master would actually kill someone in the blink of an eye. Looking at his expressionless face, it made people feel disgusted. Li Hongyang and the other two women also looked at Shi Xiaotian as if they didn't know him anymore. Li Hongyang said with a trembling voice, "Third brother, did you kill that person just now?" She still couldn't believe it. Shi Xiaotian clapped his hands with his back facing the three women without even turning his head. 10 masked men in black appeared out of nowhere and stood in a row in front of him. "Guard every direction. Anyone who dares to enter or leave without permission, kill without mercy." Shi Xiaotian ordered expressionlessly. The 10 men bowed and said, "Yes." Then they disappeared in front of everyone like ghosts. "Housekeeper," Shi Xiaotian called. Shi Shunxing quickly ran over and bowed. "Third young master." He didn't panic at the scene just now because he had followed the great general to the battlefield. This kind of scene was really nothing to him. Shi Xiaotian pointed at the decapitated corpse on the road and said, "Clean it up. Also, pass down the order that if anyone dares to disturb people's morale again, they will be punished by the family law until they die." "Yes." Shi Shunxing immediately retreated, but his eyes revealed a bit of admiration. He thought to himself, as expected of the great general's son, he didn't panic in the face of danger. Shi Xiaotian looked at the direction of the gate. In fact, with his current cultivation of the early stage of tribulation passing, he had already noticed a large group of people when they arrived. This was the first time he killed someone. Even now, his heart was still beating wildly. However, he had no choice. He was the only pillar of support in the family. If he lost his sense of propriety, then the whole family would be in chaos. Therefore, when it was necessary, he made a move to intimidate the family and let them see his methods. Naturally, they would feel at ease. The corpses on the road had already been carried away by 2 courageous servants. The bloodstains on the road had also been washed with buckets of water. The servants obediently returned to their positions and did what they were supposed to do. Although they were afraid, no one dared to show it. In the blink of an eye, peace returned to the residence. Third uncle. The child ran over and hugged Shi Xiaotian's leg. He raised his head and asked with sparkling eyes, "Did third uncle kill those people just now?" Shi Xiaotian patted his head. This nephew was much more courageous than his eldest brother and his wife. He turned around and bowed to the 3 people on the steps of the main hall. He said, "I'm sorry for frightening mother and sisters-in-law." The 3 women recovered from their panic and looked at the calm Shi Xiaotian. They immediately felt at ease. There was still a man in the family, so they didn't have to worry about anything. However, The scene of the head suddenly flying just now still made the three women's hearts palpitate. They looked at Xiaotian in disbelief. Did he really kill that person just now? The three women looked at each other. They more or less knew that Xiaotian wasn't an ordinary person. He cultivated in the back garden for a long time, but they didn't expect him to be such a person. Third brother, what's going on with the people surrounding the general's residence? Did something really happen to your father? Li Hongyang asked worriedly. Xiaotian smiled faintly and said, Mother, don't worry. It should be fine. If something really happened to my father, the people outside wouldn't have surrounded him. I'm afraid they would have already rushed inside. Li Hongyang sighed and said, Your father and brothers are not here. You're the only man in the family who can make decisions. There are some things that we women don't understand. The whole family is counting on you. Xiaotian bowed slightly and said, Mother and sisters-in-law, don't worry. I'm here, and nothing will happen. He said to Situ Hui, who was supporting Li Hongyang, and said with a smile, Second sister-in-law, help Mother go inside and rest. I'm here, don't worry. Situ Hui nodded. Bao Wanshi, whose tears had not dried yet, also pulled her son. Because Xiaotian's thunderous means just now, the panicked atmosphere in the family immediately calmed down. The three women were very confident in Xiaotian now, so they went back with peace of mind. As for the death, it was normal for a big family to occasionally execute a disobedient servant, so it wouldn't make them feel uncomfortable. On the street outside the general's mansion, there were officials who came back from work. When they saw the general's mansion being surrounded, they all shook their heads and sneered. Shurigang, who also came back from work, was stopped outside the gate by the soldiers. Xiaotian, who had a bad expression, got out of the sedan chair. When he saw the soldiers at the gate of the mansion, he immediately panicked and said, What do you mean by blocking the general's mansion? The general turned his horse around and looked at Xiaotian condescendingly. He sneered with a trace of arrogance and said, It turns out that the young master of the general's mansion is back. Recently, there have been bandits in the capital. For the safety of the general's mansion, I was ordered to protect the general's mansion. Don't come out again after you go home. Otherwise, I won't be responsible if something happens. Then he waved his whip and said, Get out of the way. Let Lord Shi in. Nonsense. How could there be bandits in the capital? Before Xiaotian could finish his words, he heard the general shout, Sir, there are some things that everyone knows. Do you really want this general to tear down all pretenses of cordiality? This general is ordered to only allow people to enter the general's mansion. No one is allowed to leave. Xiaotian was immediately at a loss for words. He waved his hand weakly, and the servants immediately went to knock on the door. The group of people entered with their tails between their legs. Behind them, the general sneered as if he was sharpening his blade when they were about to reach the main hall. Xiaotian suddenly noticed a few servants washing the floor. He accidentally wet his shoes and immediately flew into a rage. Where are your eyes? This scared the servants so much that they trembled in fear. Big brother. A cold, warning voice rang out. Xiaotian was stunned when he saw Xiaotian standing on the steps of the main hall and staring at him. This third brother of his rarely left the backyard. Why was he standing here today? Did he know something? In all fairness, Xiaotian was still very afraid of Xiaotian. There was no other reason than that Xiaotian was an immortal-like figure in his eyes. Even though they were blood brothers, he would always show a fawning expression, hoping to get 1 or 2 spirit pills or miraculous medicines. When Xiaotian was in a good mood, he would also give him 1 or 2 qi recovery pills. After eating them, Xiaotian's spirits were lifted and he became even more fawning. Third brother, why did you come out? Xiaotian revealed a face full of smiles and immediately forgot about his previous unhappiness. He hurried over and stood at the bottom of the steps, looking up happily. It was as if he was the little brother and Xiaotian was the big brother. Xiaotian frowned and raised his chin toward the outside. What's going on with the troops outside? Xiaotian's face darkened and he said sadly, I don't know if it's true or not. I heard rumors that the imperial court received a report from the west saying that father and second brother are mobilizing troops and collecting rations from all over the place. They're plotting something, and the imperial court is already mobilizing troops in preparation. I thought it was just a rumor, but looking at the situation outside, I'm afraid it's true. Third brother, you have to think of something. The imperial court clearly wants to put us under house arrest as hostages. Once father really mobilizes his troops, our family will become ghosts under the knife. Sure Xiaoyan's eyes lit up. He turned a deaf ear to the latter part of his brother's words and muttered to himself excitedly. Looks like boss is ready to make his move. We can finally leave this place and explore the cultivation world. Yo, both of you brothers are here. As expected of blood brothers, you're so close. A sinister laughter rang out. The two brothers suddenly turned around and saw a person slowly walking out from the back garden's entrance with his hands behind his back. Who else could it be but Yu Qianqiu? Sure, Yu Tian felt his vision blur, and his third brother had already disappeared and appeared at the back garden's entrance. He was extremely envious of his brother's supernatural power. He hurriedly ran over and bowed, saying, Sure Yu Tian pays his respects to Mr. Yu. Yu Qianqiu smiled and raised his hand, indicating that he didn't have to be so polite. At the side, Sure Xiaotian rubbed his hands excitedly and said, Boss, you're finally here. Does that mean our family can leave this place? Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He asked in surprise, How did you know? The soldiers outside are a signal. Sure Xiaotian immediately told him what he could think of. Chapter 680. After listening to him, Yu Qianqiu's expression froze. It seemed that Shi Wenguang had made a big move, and he couldn't hide it anymore. Fortunately, he had already arranged people to protect them, and Shi Xiaoyan's current cultivation was not weak. Otherwise, he might have harmed this family due to his lack of consideration. When he told Ferdinand that Shi Wenguang was going to send troops, he was afraid that the people from Fuxian Island would not be calm and would attack the Shi family. That was why he came to take a look in advance. He didn't expect the imperial court to know and make preparations in advance. It seemed that he had to send this family away before the 1-month deadline was up. With this layer of concern, Yu Qianqiu decided not to delay any longer. He immediately muttered to himself, Little Tian, order people to send all the valuable things in your clan to the rear garden. Then gather everyone in the clan in the rear garden. I'll wait for you in the rear garden. Sure Xiaoyan's eyes lit up. Are we leaving? Yu Qianqiu nodded. Sure Yu Tian asked in confusion. Where are we going? The excited Sure Xiaotian was afraid that he would ruin things, so he immediately catered to him. It's not safe here anymore. We're going to the place where the deities live. Misty wants to bring our whole family along, so you mustn't leak this information. Really? Sure Yu Tian was in disbelief. Of course. You've heard what Misty said. Go and prepare with me. Sure Xiaotian seemed a little unhappy. Sure Yu Tian was so happy that he couldn't close his mouth. He immediately promised, Don't worry, third brother. I won't tell anyone, not even your sister-in-law. I'll give her a surprise. He ran away happily. Yu Qianqiu was speechless at the Shi family's eldest brother, who was always dreaming about deities. He shook his head and returned to the backyard. He went to the small courtyard to inform Ling Feng, Beizi, and Xian Ping to prepare to leave. The Shi family was indeed a big family with a lot of valuable things. Not to mention the big and small bags, including the boxes filled with things, it was really like a mountain. In the back garden, there were more than 100 servants of the Shi family alone. In less than half a day, they had prepared all the people and belongings. With such high efficiency, it could be seen that the two brothers had done a good job in mobilizing the people. Li Hongyang and her daughter-in-law, who were gathered together, walked to Yu Qianqiu and bowed. Li Hongyang bowed slightly and said, Mr. is still the same. You haven't changed at all. It's really enviable. As he spoke, he pointed at the people and belongings behind him and asked worriedly, I just don't know why Sir gave such an order. Before she could finish her words, Shi Yu Tian ran over and held her back. He said anxiously, Mother, Sir has his reasons for doing this. When the time comes, you will naturally know what is going on. He was afraid that his mother would make Yu Qianshou unhappy and take him to the place where the immortals lived. To him, high positions, generous salaries, and descendants of rich and powerful families were all illusory. Only immortals were extraordinary and worth pursuing. Yu Qianshou nodded and said, "Don't worry, madam. Sure Yu Tian is right. Hee. When we arrive at the place, I'm afraid madam won't want to come back. You will have to thank me." Sure Yotian's eyes lit up when he heard this. Li Hongyang was still a little worried about her unreliable eldest son. She looked at Sure Xiaotian and saw him smiling and nodding his head. Only then did she feel relieved. She smiled awkwardly at Yu Qianshou and said, "I was reckless. Please don't take it to heart, sir." Yu Qianshou wasn't going to argue with her. With his hands clasped behind his back, he signaled the 10 black-clothed masked men with his eyes. The 10 men quickly spread out and searched the entire general's residence. After making sure that no one had missed anything, they quickly returned and signaled to Yu Qianshou that there was no problem. The 10 men then spread out and surrounded the people and belongings in the backyard. Yu Qianshou put down his hands behind his back and slowly opened his arms. A large amount of majestic mist gushed out from his body and slowly covered the entire backyard. This magical scene stunned everyone, especially Sure Yu Tian. He looked excited and thought to himself, "This is indeed the legendary deity who can breathe clouds and spit out mist." The mist that shrouded the backyard became thicker and thicker. In the end, it reached the point where they could not see the person in front of them clearly. Everyone felt that it was both magical and mysterious. However, they did not know that the backyard of the general's residence had been emptied out in an instant. In the military camp at the western border, a large piece of empty space had been surrounded by cloth. This was done within an hour after Shi Wenguang received the order from Yu Qianshou. No one was allowed to come within 100 meters of the outside of the cloth wall. Only Shi Wenguang and his son were pacing back and forth anxiously. At this moment, the entrance of the cloth wall was lifted and Yu Qianshou walked out with a smile. The father and son strode over and bowed. Shi Wenguang could not help but ask, "Sir, inside?" Yu Qianshou pulled up the curtain and saw a thick fog inside. He could not see anything clearly. As the father and son looked at each other, they saw Yu Qianshou extend his hand inside. His sleeves sucked in the thick fog like a whale drawing water. The crowd and a mountainous pile of things gradually appeared behind the cloth wall, leaving the father and son dumbfounded. Holy **T. They almost moved the entire general's residence over. When the people inside saw their surroundings, they could not figure out what was going on. When they saw Shi Wenguang and his son, they immediately burst into an uproar. Yu Qianshou walked away with a smile, not disturbing the family reunion. The reason why he had released the thick fog to cover it up was because he had to pass by Utopia as a transit point. He did not want unrelated people to know the secret of Utopia, so he used the thick fog to deliberately mystify them. As for the 10 Special Forces members who were protecting the Shi residence, they had already returned when they passed by Utopia. "Boss!" A call came from behind. Yu Qianshou turned around and saw that it was Ling Feng and the other two. It seemed like they did not want to disturb Shi Wenguang's family reunion. The three of them sized up the scenery around them. When they looked at Yu Qianshou again, they were filled with deep respect. They couldn't help but admire him. In the blink of an eye, he had come to Shi Wenguang's western military camp from the distant capital. Furthermore, he had brought so many people and things at once. This divine ability was unheard of. The three of them followed him to Shi Wenguang's tent. As they walked, Ling Feng asked respectfully, "Boss, what should the three of us do in the future?" When the soldiers guarding the tent saw that it was Yu Qianshou, they did not stop him and let him in. After entering the tent, Yu Qianshou said with a smile, "General Shi is about to mobilize his troops. I'm afraid that someone will harm them. The three of you will continue to follow Shi Xiaotian and be in charge of protecting his family. Go." The three of them were somewhat reluctant. How could it be better to follow someone as powerful as Yu Qianshou? However, they did not dare to disobey. They acknowledged and left. The tent was empty. Yu Qianshou walked to the commander's seat in the center and sat down to take a nap. In his mind, he was thinking about how to deal with the Daluo sect. After an unknown period of time, he suddenly heard footsteps outside. His eyes slowly opened. Shi Wenguang happily walked in with his grandson in his arms and the rest of the family. The family looked very happy. They looked at Yu Qianqiu with respectful expressions. This was the first time they had experienced such a magical scene. They had been in the capital before, but they had arrived here in the blink of an eye. It was simply too magical. In their eyes, Yu Qianqiu had become a living god. However, there seemed to be someone who was not very happy, and that person was Shi Yutian. His expression was somewhat stiff. He had naively believed that he would be able to go to the place where the gods lived. He had been full of excitement when he was in the clouds, but who knew that he would end up here? He was dumbfounded. He was happy that his family was reunited, but he was even more disappointed. Shi Wenguang put down his grandson and flung off his cloak. He knelt on one knee and cupped his fists. Shi Wenguang, thanks, sir, for your help. There is nothing I can do to repay you. Please accept this general's bow. As he knelt, the entire family followed suit. There's no need to be so polite, General. Rise. Yu Qianqiu rose from his seat and walked around the table to face Shi Wenguang. He smiled faintly. Does General still remember the poem I read to you? I dare not forget. Shi Wenguang recited heroically. The mountains are high, the roads are long, and the pits are deep. The army gallops unhindered. Who dares to fight on horseback? Only I, General Shi. Yu Qianqiu nodded with a smile and said, I have cleared all of your worries for you, General. I hope that you will fulfill your promise to me. Let the people of the world live a peaceful life as soon as possible so that my efforts will not be in vain. Shi Wenguang said sincerely, Don't worry, sir. Everything is being prepared in an orderly manner. The army will attack as soon as possible. As an outsider, I will not interfere with the matters of war. I believe in your abilities, General. You just need to follow our previous agreement and do as you wish. Yu Qianqiu cupped his fists at everyone. I shall not disturb your family reunion. I shall take my leave first. Boss! Shi Xiaotian shouted anxiously. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. What else do you want? Shi Xiaotian begged with a bitter expression. Don't leave me behind. Bring me to the cultivation world. At this moment, Shi Yutian also jumped out. He nodded and bowed. Sir, please take me with you. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes. He ignored Shi Yutian and stared at Shi Xiaotian. What are you going to do? You're not weak now. Protecting your family is the right thing to do. Ling Feng and the others will help you. But remember, as a cultivator, you should not interfere with the matters of war. Otherwise, I will not forgive you. With that said, he disappeared from the tent without giving Shi Xiaotian a chance to speak. Everyone in the tent searched everywhere, but they couldn't find any trace of Yu Qianqiu. Shi Xiaotian glared at his big brother. He might be the one who ruined everything. Shi Yutian walked to the side with a guilty conscience. Shi Wenguang looked around and sighed. What a godly man. Li Hongyang came over and said, It's all thanks to you, sir. Otherwise, I don't know when our family will be reunited. Chapter 681. There were few people in the vast mountain range. In the deep belly of the mountain, there were 3 towering peaks connected to each other. The mountains were so steep that they pierced through the clouds. Waterfalls splashed on the mountainside, and streams gurgled at the foot of the mountain. Sometimes, beasts would drink by the stream, and birds would fly over the forest. It was a peaceful and beautiful scene. Looking up the mountain, one could faintly see the buildings on the 3 peaks. There was no path leading to the summit at the foot of the mountain. If mortals saw this, they would definitely think that the mountain was the residence of immortals. In fact, the people who lived on the summit were no longer mortals. This was the Daluo sect, the second largest righteous sect in Huaxia's cultivation world. Under the bright sun, the glazed roof and eaves reflected brilliant colors under the wind and clouds on the mountaintop. From afar, the 3 peaks shone with colorful lights, like 3 pearls worshipped between heaven and earth. It was not a blessed land of immortals, but it was better than one. The majestic hall in the middle of the three peaks was called Lingxiao Hall. It was the central decision-making area of the Daluo sect. At this time, dozens of people sat on the ground in the hall, facing the one-armed sect master, Luo Qingtian, who was sitting in the center. The people in the hall didn't look good. There was no other reason than the soul formation masters from the various countries were like sharp blades on their necks, able to take their lives at any time. The disaster of annihilation could happen in an instant. No one could imagine how terrifying the legendary soul formation masters were. When such a person descended, the scene would make people shudder. In fact, this fear wasn't only shrouded in the Daluo sect. All the major sects were looking for a solution. No one would sit still and wait for death. However, Yu Qianshou, who caused a stir in the various countries, suddenly made everyone's eyes light up. All the major sects had their eyes on Yu Qianshou. Yu Qianshou, who was known as the #1 master below the soul formation stage and had a good relationship with several other soul formation masters, had undoubtedly become the savior in everyone's eyes. However, what made the Daluo sect depressed was that the person who could help them out of this crisis was not someone else, but Yu Qianshou. The Daluo sect and Yu Qianshou didn't just have a small misunderstanding, but several feuds. You want your enemy to help you solve the crisis? It would be best if they didn't hit him when he was down. Despite their worries, the upper echelons of the Daluo sect firmly believed that profit was the eternal pursuit of the cultivation world. Hatred was nothing in the face of profit. Many examples throughout the ages had proven this point. The upper echelons of the Daluo sect had decided to part with a large portion of the wealth that the sect had accumulated over the past 1,000 years, a total of 3 billion high-grade spirit stones. They believed that no one in the world could refuse such a large sum of wealth. As far as the exalted sect was concerned, the sect's accumulated wealth was meant to be used in times of crisis. As long as the sect could survive this crisis, there would always be a chance to earn back the money. However, what made the upper echelons of the Daluo sect disappointed was that the people they sent to the Wu clan to look for Yu Qianshou didn't even have a chance to speak to Yu Qianshou before they were chased out. The upper echelons of the Daluo sect believed that it was because Yu Qianshou didn't know how large the wealth was. Therefore, Luo Qingtian personally contacted the Wu clan's patriarch, Wu Sihai, and secretly revealed the number of spirit stones. Hoping that Wu Sihai could help pass the message to Yu Qianshou soon, Luo Qingtian waited for Wu Sihai to pass the message to Yu Qianshou, and it was a simple sentence. Some things can't be changed no matter how much money you have. It seems that we can't count on Yu Qianshou. Luo Qingtian sighed and looked at the elders in the Lingxiao Hall. Elders, do you have any other ideas? The hall fell into silence again. Zhu Xianxian, who was in the crowd, suddenly asked, Sect Master, I wonder what the consecrators mean. Many people looked at him with some resentment in their eyes. They all felt that if he hadn't become enemies with Yu Qianshou several times, they wouldn't have fallen into such a difficult situation today. Luo Qingtian shook his head slightly. The consecrators don't have any better ideas. Show that you will obey any decision of the sect. If that's the case, Zhu Xianxian muttered, I have an idea, but I don't know if I should say it. Everyone looked surprised. An elder beside him frowned and said, Elder Zhu, what time is it now? If you have any ideas, just say it and let everyone discuss it. Why are you hesitating? Luo Qingtian also nodded and signaled him to say it quickly. Zhu Xianxian's eyes flickered. Our Chinese cultivation world has fallen into such a precarious situation because we have been complacent. Maybe we can look further. Since we know that we are not the opponents of the various countries, why do we have to be opponents? Maybe it's a good choice to be friends. For example, we can try to send people to contact other countries. Since we are willing to take out 3 billion high-grade spirit stones, I believe we can make friends with them. As soon as he said that, everyone was shocked. The hall was so quiet that the sound of ants crawling could be heard. Everyone looked at each other. Suddenly, someone stood up and pointed his finger at Zhu Xianxian. He shouted angrily, Zhu Xianxian, how can you say such words that forget your ancestors? What's the difference between this and being a traitor of the Chinese cultivation world? Elder Hong, Zhu Xianxian shouted and stood up abruptly. He said tit for tat. This is just a method that I have no other choice. Besides, everyone asked me to say it. How can you say that I forget my ancestors? Besides, who said that being friends with various countries is forgetting my ancestors? Yu Qianqiu is a good example. Didn't he also make friends with the soul formation stage masters of various countries? Why didn't anyone say that he forgot his ancestors and betrayed the Chinese cultivation world? Instead, everyone begged him? No matter what, I'm also thinking about the eternal foundation of the Daluo sect. If everyone thinks that this method is inappropriate, you don't have to use it. Is there need to put such a big hat on me? You're twisting words and forcing logic. Elder Hong was almost speechless. Compared to Zhu Xianxian, who had been practicing outside for a long time, his eloquence was worse. All right, stop arguing. Luo Qingtian shouted and stood up. He looked at the two people who were arguing and said, to put it bluntly, Yu Qianqiu's reputation was built in various countries. If we, the dignified Daluo sect, take out a large amount of spirit stones to go to other countries to make friends, we are completely different from Yu Qianqiu. Don't say such words in the future. As long as I, Luo Qingtian, am still the leader of the Daluo sect, I will not agree to such things. Besides, things haven't developed to the end yet. Who can be sure that there won't be a turn for the better? At the same time, there was a sudden dang, dang, dang sound of alarm coming from outside the hall. It echoed in the sky above the entire Daluo sect. Everyone in the hall sprung up at the same time and looked out of the hall, only to hear several disciples shouting anxiously, "Enemy attack! Enemy attack!" With the cultivation of everyone in the hall, they immediately heard the dense sound of flying coming from all directions. Some of the faster ones had already reached the top of the hall in an instant. Everyone's expression changed. A cold light flashed from their storage bags and rushed into the sky without hesitation. With a bang, it directly blasted the roof of the Lingxiao Hall. Chapter 682. The moment the roof was blasted open by the swords, a dozen or so huge sword auras descended from the sky and knocked away the flying swords. They were like a dozen or so huge icicles that pierced into the numinous sky hall. Boom, boom. The deafening sound masked the shrill cries of pain. The entire numinous sky hall began to tremble. Wood, stone, and debris flew in all directions. Smoke and dust rose, and people flew everywhere in a daze. A few corpses were left in the hall, while the rest broke through the walls with their palms. At this critical moment, no one cared about the numinous sky hall. Saving their lives was the most important thing. Moreover, the numinous sky hall had already been destroyed by the enemy's attack. As soon as the people rushed out of the hall, they were struck by the fierce attacks from above. They did not even have the chance to see who the enemy was. They had to dodge the fatal attacks first. Not only the numinous sky hall, but the halls on the other two mountains were also being attacked crazily at the same time. The Daluo sect's consecration hall, in particular, had more than 100 people gathered in the sky. They struck out more than 100 sword auras and tore down the entire hall in an instant. The attack was so vicious and crazy that it was hard to imagine. It was as if they did not intend to give the enemy any chance to catch their breath. The moment the consecration hall collapsed, a dozen or so figures with angry roars exploded towards the attacking people in the sky. They instantly entered the crowd of people in the sky and engaged in a chaotic battle. In an instant, light shone in all directions, and loud rumbling sounds reverberated in the sky. Screams of pain could be heard, and corpses continuously fell from the sky. "Get out of the way!" With a loud shout, the 100 or so people in the sky above the consecration hall dispersed. At the same time, a dozen or so figures charged towards the dozen or so people who rushed out from below. The two groups of experts at the end of the tribulation passing stage fiercely collided and fought crazily with no regard for their lives. The outcome of these dozen or so people was the key to the outcome of the entire battle. In the sky around Luo Shao Mountain, a dense crowd of people continuously swarmed over. The colors were black and white. Most of the people in black were men, while the people in white were women. It was a very strange attack combination. All disciples fight, attack. Someone on top of Luo Xiao mountain roared furiously. Countless silhouettes shot out from the top of the mountain. No one knew where they came from, but they rushed towards the crowd that was besieging them. Soon, both sides started fighting crazily. The sea of clouds around Mount Luo Xiao immediately started to churn, as if countless rocks had been thrown into a calm lake. The wind became stronger, and a chaotic aura filled the air. Amidst the continuous rumbling, the entire Luo Xiao mountain seemed to be shaking. The beasts and birds at the foot of the mountain all stopped moving and looked up curiously. Suddenly, a corpse fell down at lightning speed. The cheerful stream splashed high waves with a bang. The smell of blood spread, and the stream was instantly mixed with dark red as it flowed down. Then the second and third corpses fell. Corpses fell everywhere, and the beasts and birds were so frightened that they fled in all directions. In the dense forest at the foot of the mountain, a large number of black-clothed and masked men had appeared out of nowhere. Only a pair of eyes could be seen as they quietly lurked in the wilderness. Yu Qianshou silently stood on a big tree and looked up at the peak of the mountain. After seeing that the battle had already started, he expressionlessly waved his hand and pointed at Mount Luo Xiao with force. Zhang Peng, who was staring at him under the tree, immediately turned around and ordered loudly after receiving the order, "Attack according to the original plan." In an instant, a dense group of black-clothed men suddenly appeared in the deep forest. With Mount Luo Xiao as the center, they quickly surrounded it. Starting from the foot of Mount Luo Xiao, they spread upwards in a three-dimensional manner, gradually shrinking the encirclement towards the Daluo sect at the peak of the mountain. This was an attack team made up of 6,000 members of Utopia. It was the largest combined attack of the Utopia army. The order the 6,000 Tribulation Transcendence experts received was, kill every disciple of the Daluo sect. Leave no one alive. Lady Hua Yungu, it's you. Luo Qingtian angrily raised his sword and pointed at the sky. The Daluo sect has no grudges with the Moon sect. Even if there were some small conflicts, there's no need to make such a big fuss. Why did you sneak attack the Daluo sect? He had already lost an arm. Now, with his messy clothes, the dignified leader of the Daluo sect looked extremely disheveled. The 6 elders stood with their backs to him. Until now, their expressions were still filled with panic and disbelief. Everything had happened so suddenly. In the blink of an eye, only 6 of the dozens of elders were left. The intensity of the battle was beyond their imagination. The Moon sect had actually sent more than 10 tribulation cultivators to sneak attack them. There were 7 in the final stage of the tribulation alone. The beautiful woman pointed at by the sword in the sky was the previous leader of the Moon sect, Lady Hua Yungu. She was also Fairy Jade Flower's master. Lady Hua Yungu stared down coldly and said, "Leader Luo, don't you think it's too late to say this now? The Moon sect isn't the only one targeting the Daluo sect. Why don't you take a good look first?" Luo Qingtian suddenly looked around and realized that the Moon sect disciples in white were only targeting the Lingxiao Hall's mountain. The other 2 mountains were being attacked by a group of cultivators in black. Luo Qingtian's pupils constricted and he exclaimed, 10,000 demons. Then he suddenly stared at Lady Hua Yungu and shouted angrily, "The Moon sect belongs to the righteous path. How dare you ally with the 10,000 demons to attack the Daluo sect? You deserve to die. It's not the Moon sect that deserves to die, it's the Daluo sect. Who told you to offend someone you shouldn't have? From today onwards, the Daluo sect will no longer exist in the cultivation world. The Moon sect will become the 2nd largest sect of the righteous path." A cold smile appeared on Lady Hua Yungu's face. It was an almost perverted smile. When it appeared on a woman's face, it was disgusting. Her expression was like that of a cat playing with a mouse. Suddenly, a cold voice came from afar. "Lady Hua, what are you talking about? Hurry up and take care of that side. Come and help." Finish the battle quickly. Don't be late. Hua Yungu turned to stare at a black-robed, silver-haired, and skinny old man in the middle of a fierce battle. She replied disdainfully, Yin Wuchen, I know what to do. I don't need you to teach me. If you think you're no match for Luo Qingtian, why don't you say something? I'll definitely help you. Yin Wuchen sneered. He was about to speak when the elder in black who was fighting with him scolded, Lady Hua, you bitch. How dare you collude with Yin Wuchen? You'll die a horrible death. This person was Luo Qingtian's master and the previous leader of the Daluo sect, Luo Guang. Boom! Yin Wuchen and Luo Guang fiercely collided. Their hair and robes shook violently. The two of them crossed their swords and blocked each other. Almost simultaneously, they quickly swung their palms towards each other. Bang! A deafening sound rang out. The two of them weren't shaken apart. Instead, their palms and fingers intertwined, grabbing each other. A powerful shockwave spread in all directions. The two of them were in a stalemate. From the twisted expressions on their faces, it could be seen that they were in a stalemate. It seemed like the difference in their cultivation wasn't that great. However, Yin Wuchen still forced a smile and laughed at his opponent. Old man Luo, you actually dare to call Lady Hua Yungu a bitch? Hee hee. Good scolding, I like it. Luo Guang immediately spat. Don't take pleasure in my misfortune. If you have the time, think about your son and grandson. I'm guessing they've already been torn to pieces. I'll wait and see. Let's see if you, Yin Wuchen, can still laugh after seeing your son die. The surrounding people were already in a mess. This group of old and experienced people were not willing to be at a disadvantage. Even their words were not to be outdone. On the other side, Lady Hua Yungu was already trembling in anger after being called a bitch by the two of them. When she calmed down, she immediately pointed at Luo Qingtian and the others and screamed, Kill them! Kill them! Yin Wuchen's face darkened after hearing Luo Guang's words. He could no longer laugh. On the other hand, Luo Guang's expression changed because of Lady Hua Yungu's words. The two of them opened their eyes wide. A powerful shockwave exploded between them. Boom! The two of them were blasted away. Luo Guang's figure quickly rushed towards Lady Hua Yungu. He hurriedly shouted in the air, All worshippers, follow me and protect the sect leader. In an instant, the 10 people who were fighting with the 10,000 demons all disregarded everything and chased after them. Naturally, the 10,000 demons would not let them go. They immediately chased after them. However, after chasing for a short distance, they stopped in the air again. They all looked back at Yin Wuchen, who was slowly flying towards them. They did not know what he meant by asking them to wait. Yin Wuchen flashed and joined the 10,000 demons who were in the late tribulation passing stage. He looked at Lady Hua Yungu and the others who were being forced into a panic. He secretly transmitted a message to his own people. What's the hurry? The Daluo sect's defeat is already decided. If we can let the Daluo sect kill Lady Hua Yungu and the others before this, wouldn't that be even better? Surround them. Don't let them escape. We just need to prepare to clean up the final mess. The 10,000 demons who were in the late tribulation passing stage immediately understood Yin Wuchen's plan. They all looked at the former palace lord with admiration. He did not lose his head in the fierce battle and instantly grasped the most advantageous situation for the 10,000 demons. No wonder he was once the leader of the diabolism. Think about it. The Moon Sect only had 7 people in the late tribulation passing stage, while the Daluo Sect had 15. If the two sides continue to fight, the Moon Sect would definitely suffer a great loss. The Daluo Sect would also be fighting with their lives on the line. When the 10,000 demons cleaned up the mess, it would be even easier. In short, whether it was the destruction of the Daluo Sect or the great loss of the Moon Sect, it was a loss for the righteous path. On the other hand, the 10,000 demons and the diabolism had a great advantage. There were 18 people in the Moon Sect. Among them, 11 were in the middle tribulation passing stage, and 7 were in the late tribulation passing stage. Originally, it should have been easy to deal with the remaining 6 people. After all, there was not a single person in the late tribulation passing stage among the 6. However, in just a few words, the situation suddenly changed. No one expected the 15 Luo Sect's worshippers to counterattack. Chapter 683. By now, everyone could tell that the 10,000 demons were going easy on them. Hua Yunga's side was under a lot more pressure. It was the combined attack of 15 cultivators in the last phase of the tribulation. The 7 cultivators in the last phase of the tribulation of the Moon Clan couldn't even protect themselves, let alone the other 11. The 11 women were immediately violently ravaged. Facing the joint attack of 15 cultivators at the end of the crossing tribulation stage, each of them perished. Hua Yungu almost vomited blood. She regretted not killing Luo Qingtian and the other 5 earlier. Now Yin Wuchen had taken advantage of her. As the previous leader of the Moon Clan, Hua Yungu was definitely not stupid. She could see through Yin Wuchen's evil intentions, but so what? The cultivation world was full of deceit, and danger could happen in an instant. She was useless if she couldn't guard against it. Hua Yungu looked over angrily. Yin Wuchen, who was wearing a black robe and had silver hair, was watching the fight with a smile. The 13 cultivators in the last phase of the tribulation also ignored the disciples of the 10,000 demons. Instead, they watched mockingly as the women were tortured by a group of people. The 11 women in the middle phase of the tribulation were no match for the 15 cultivators from the Daluo sect. They were all killed in the blink of an eye. Hua Yunga fought back with all her might. She yelled furiously, "Yin Wuchen, you're despicable. TSK, 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 TSK. Yin Wuchen shook his head and laughed. Hua Yungu, I meant well. You should appreciate it. Old Luo called you AB*TCH, and even I can't stand it anymore. I'm giving you a chance to kill old Luo yourself. Sigh, I'm a despicable one now. Tell me, what's the point of this?" The last sentence was directed at the dozen cultivators in the last phase of the tribulation. Hearing this, more than a dozen people immediately looked up to the sky and laughed wildly, showing the arrogant demeanor of the demonic Tao. Hua Yunga was so angry that she wanted to vomit blood. But she knew this wasn't the time to be impulsive. While fighting off the attacks of the 2 cultivators from the Daluo sect, she shouted, "Yin Wuchen, do you really want to watch? If you ruin Yu Qianzhou's plan, your 10,000 demons won't have a good ending either." Yin Wuchen surveyed his surroundings. He was confident that the final outcome would not be out of his control and that it would not affect Yu Qianzhou's plans. He snorted coldly and said, "Hua Yungu, I know what to do. I don't need you to teach me. If you think that you're no match for old man Luo, you might as well tell me, and I'll lend you a hand." He repeated Hua Yungu's words back to Hua Yungu, word for word. Without a doubt, he was telling Hua Yungu, "You were the one who was heartless first, so don't blame me for being unjust later." This sentence made Hua Yunga speechless. She did not expect retribution to come so quickly. The mention of Yu Qianzhou in their conversation shocked the people from the Daluo sect. They vaguely guessed the reason why the 10,000 demons had joined forces with the Moon sect. It seemed that Yu Qianzhou was here for revenge. Luo Qingtian, who was surrounded and protected by the 6 elders, had a look of determination in his eyes. He immediately sent a message to the 15 masters who were attacking fiercely. "Masters, it's enough to trap the people from the Moon sect, but don't kill them. The turning point of the Daluo sect today lies with the people from the Moon sect." As the leader of the Daluo sect, he spoke. The fierce attacks of the 15 cultivators in the last phase of the tribulation passing stage from the Daluo sect eased up. Luo Qingtian looked at the 15 consecrators fighting fiercely and sighed with emotion in his heart. The reason why a big sect could become a big sect was because of the existence of these mainstays. Every time there was a big change, the sect could be supported and not fall. Had it not been for the support of these 15 elders, the Grand Immortal sect would have already collapsed, let alone his own life. Hua Yungu's group of 7 naturally felt that their opponents' attacks had weakened. It seemed that they did not want to kill them. This made the 7 secretly feel strange. They even suspected that there was a bigger conspiracy behind this? Could it be that they wanted to capture them alive? Yin Wuchen's eyes narrowed. He also saw that something was wrong. The 13 masters in the last phase of the tribulation passing stage from the 10,000 demons were also surprised. They all saw something strange, but they could not figure out what the Daluo sect was up to. Luo Qingtian, who looked a little disheveled, now had the heroic spirit of a leader. He shouted loudly, "Hua Yungu, you and I belong to the righteous path. We should not fight to the death. If we continue to fight, it will only benefit the demons. It will be the righteous path that will suffer losses. I believe that the Moon Sect was bewitched by others. Now that we are both in a critical situation, why don't we join hands and fight against the demons together? As long as we can defeat the 10,000 demons together today, I, Luo Qingtian, as the leader of the Daluo sect, swear that I will not pursue the matter of the Moon Sect attacking the Daluo sect. I will pretend that this never happened. Huayunga, what do you think?" As soon as he said this, the three masters were shocked. The faces of the 10,000 demons changed. The Daluo sect already had one more master in the last phase of the tribulation passing stage than the 10,000 demons. Plus, they were fighting on the territory of the Daluo sect. The reason why they attacked the Daluo sect this time was that the Moon Sect was willing to send 7 masters in the last phase of the tribulation passing stage. That was why they had the confidence to win. If the 7 masters from the Moon Sect turned against them, and the 15 from the Daluo sect joined hands, the 10,000 demons would definitely lose. Yin Wuchen looked at Luo Qingtian with a complicated expression. He secretly admired him. Luo Qingtian was indeed the leader of the Daluo clan. He was able to let go at the most critical moment. So many elders of the Moon clan had been killed, but he was still able to calm down and deal with the situation calmly. He was able to let go of the blood feud so easily. The 15 masters from the Daluo sect immediately understood Luo Qingtian's intention. They knew that the dead could not come back to life. Protecting the Daluo sect was their top priority. The leader's decision was right. Luo Guang looked at his disciple with relief and said loudly, "Hua Yungu, we will follow the leader's order. What do you think? I hope you can make a decision quickly." His words contained a hint of support for Luo Qingtian, but there was also a hint of a threat to Hua Yungu. Hua Yunga hesitated. She believed Luo Qingtian's words, but how was she going to explain it to Yu Qianqiu? When the Moon Sect received news from Hua Rui from Hat Island, they also hesitated whether to join hands with the 10,000 demons to attack the Daluo sect. After a closed-door analysis by the higher-ups of the Moon Sect, they felt that the advantages outweighed the disadvantages. First, Yu Qianqiu promised to help the Moon Sect when the soul formation cultivators from other countries threatened the Moon Sect. Second, after killing the Daluo sect, the Moon Sect would naturally become the second largest sect of the righteous path. This was the secret desire of the Moon Sect for many years. Third, after destroying the Daluo sect, Yu Qianqiu promised not to take any of the Daluo sect's wealth. The Moon Sect and the 10,000 demons would split it among themselves. As for the fourth condition, Yu Qianqiu threatened that since the Moon Sect already knew the secret, if they didn't agree, he would take care of the Moon Sect. The Moon Sect had no choice but to agree. But now, Hua Yungu really hesitated. If they joined hands with the Daluo sect, they would offend Yu Qianqiu. If they didn't, the 10,000 demons' actions were too infuriating. They had caused the deaths of 11 cultivators from the Moon Sect. Just then, Yin Wuchen chuckled awkwardly. He didn't expect to shoot himself in the foot. He said loudly, "Hua Yungu, we're even now. Don't fall for other people's tricks. Now, you and I will continue to work together and destroy the Daluo sect. What do you think?" The 10,000 demons and the Daluo sect all became alert. The Moon Sect decision could decide the outcome of the battle. "Hey, who are they?" One of the 10,000 demons suddenly pointed at the masked men in black who were about to reach the other 2 mountains. If one didn't pay attention, they would think that they were from the 10,000 demons because they were all dressed in black. But these people all had their faces covered. They obviously weren't from the 10,000 demons. But the strange thing was that these masked men didn't target the 10,000 demons. They only targeted the Daluo Sect disciples. The people from the Daluo Sect looked over and their expressions changed. Luo Qingtian frowned. He felt a deep sense of danger. The masked men in black didn't attack quickly, but they cooperated with each other very well. They surrounded the Daluo Sect disciples layer by layer. They would rather slow down than let a single Daluo Sect disciple go. The Daluo Sect disciples couldn't resist at all. As soon as they collided with them, they were immediately killed. Such a strict and brutal fighting style that left no survivors, and the flawless coordination was a ghastly sight to behold. The most frightening thing was that these masked men were all at the early stage of tribulation passing. Occasionally, a Daluo Sect disciple in the middle stage of tribulation passing would be surrounded and killed by more than a dozen masked men. Even a Daluo Sect disciple in the middle stage of tribulation passing couldn't stop them. Obviously, without a top expert to stop them, the Daluo Sect disciples could only wait to be slaughtered. However, the Daluo Sect's top experts in the late stage of tribulation passing were all trapped here. They couldn't go over to help. They could only watch as the black net closed in. Yan Wuchen looked at it and was stunned at first. Then, he laughed and said, "Needless to say, Yu Qianshou has arranged for a third party. It seems that Yu Qianshou is determined to win." He was relieved now. In such a situation, if Hua Yunga was not stupid, she would naturally know what to do. Hua Yunga only took a few glances and was shocked. She didn't expect Yu Qianshou to have a backup plan. She didn't know if there were any other arrangements. Fortunately, she didn't agree to the Daluo Sect's request. She rolled her eyes and shouted, "Yan Wuchen, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and attack." The meaning of this sentence was obvious. Luo Guang immediately flew into a rage out of humiliation. "Hua Yunga, you old bitch. I won't forgive you." His figure shot out in a palm shadow with the force of a mountain shot toward Hua Yungu. The shockwave swept out like a hurricane. Even the other late-stage tribulation passing experts had to retreat and hurriedly move out of the way. The Daluo mountain-splitting palm was a palm that Luo Guang had used all his cultivation in a fit of rage. Its power was so ferocious that even Luo Guang couldn't measure it. He hated Hua Yungu for her fickleness. Earlier, he had shown her mercy, hoping that she would change sides. He didn't expect that by sparing her life, his side would fall into a desperate situation. Chapter 684. If he had known this would happen, he wouldn't have had high hopes for this bitch. He would have killed her as soon as possible. This angry palm seemed to have the intention of taking Hua Yunga's life back. Hua Yunga was shocked. She didn't expect Luo Guang's palm to be so powerful. She knew she couldn't block it and wanted to teleport away, but it was too late. Bang! A heavy palm landed on Hua Yungu's disappearing figure. Teleportation was no longer possible. Hua Yunga's entire body was sent flying. She coughed up a mouthful of blood while in midair. She had misjudged and was seriously injured. If she had fought back forcefully, even if she couldn't block it, she wouldn't be so badly injured. After all, the difference in cultivation between them wasn't too great. They were both experts of the same level. She had chosen to escape, but she hadn't. It was equivalent to being hit by the palm. Yin Bugue was shocked at first, but then a strange smile appeared on his face. The Daluo Sect was already attacking the 7 from the Moon Clan, but he didn't give the order for the 10,000 demons to attack. The 10 or so experts from the 10,000 demons looked at each other and didn't do anything. They understood that the palace master still wanted to kill them with a borrowed knife. "Clan master!" The remaining people from the Moon Clan cried out. But they were all in danger and couldn't spare a hand to save Hua Yungu. In his anger, Luo Guang swore to kill Hua Yungu. He dashed forward and chased after Hua Yungu. Facing the body that had lost the ability to move in the air, he struck out with his palm again. The heaven-shaking palm struck out with a momentum that could destroy everything. It really had the power to split a mountain. Hua Yungu was seriously injured and had lost the ability to defend herself. If this palm hit her again, she would definitely be chopped into pieces. But at this moment, a figure suddenly dashed up from the foot of the mountain. That person seemed to be shocked when he jumped out. He looked at the person in his arms in disbelief. Why did a beautiful woman come to him? That was too much. Damn! Daluo Mountain splitting palm. That person let out a strange cry. He suddenly noticed the huge palm-shaped astral image that was coming at him. Since he could call out its name, it was obvious that this was not his first time coming into contact with the Daluo Mountain splitting palm. At the same time as he let out a strange cry, he had already waved his sleeves. A dense mass of black light flashed out, directly shooting towards the incoming palm silhouette. Hiss, hiss, hiss. The dense mass of black light emitted a sound similar to that of sharp blade cutting through paper. The palm silhouette collapsed with a loud rumble, causing waves of chi to surge out in all directions. The Daluo Mountain splitting palm was instantly broken. Luo Guang, who was chasing after him, was shocked. He waved his palms and chased after the flying sword, breaking through the wind and shooting out. One man and one sword attacked in a frenzy that complemented each other. You're overestimating yourself. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. Yin Wuchen and the other experts of the 10,000 demons stared at the scene unblinkingly. Luo Qingtian and the others also held their breaths and watched with rapt attention. They all wanted to see what kind of ability this rumor number 1 expert below the soul formation stage had to be able to cause such a huge commotion among the many powerful experts in the various countries. Before the sword arrived, the strong wind was already surging toward them. Yu Qianqiu was unfazed in the face of all this, and he was still holding the unconscious Hua Yungu in one arm. Suddenly, he narrowed his eyes slightly. While facing the aggressive wind, he quickly swung his other arm, and 2 of his fingers brazenly flicked at the silver arc that was charging at him. Ding! A crisp sound rang out, and the flying sword temporarily stopped in the air. The powerful airflow that the flying sword had condensed instantly collapsed and exploded in a chaotic manner. The flying sword disappeared, and all that could be seen was silver dust dancing in the air, swirling chaotically along with the chaotic airflow. Yin Wuchen and the others' eyes widened, and their mouths gaped so wide that an egg could fit inside. Their faces were filled with disbelief. In that instant just now, the flying sword had actually been shattered into dust by Yu Qianqiu's 2 fingers. Oh my God, just how powerful was his cultivation? No wonder he was the number 1 expert below the soul formation stage, whose name shook the world. Just how powerful would a true soul formation stage cultivator be? Everyone began to ask themselves this question. Thinking about the terrifying scene of a soul formation expert descending upon the cultivation world of Huaxia, everyone felt a chill run down their spines. Hi! Luo Guang sped up and shot over. Not only did the flying sword's fate not scare him, but it also made him rush over even faster. Things seemed a little strange. Because Yu Qianqiu was facing the charging Luo Guang, he could see the expression on Luo Guang's face better than anyone else. Seeing the generous smile on Luo Guang's face, he suddenly remembered the expression on Im Baikong's face before he self-destructed his Dantian in the cornucopia. The 2 of them had almost the same smile. Yu Qianqiu's pupils constricted, and the words self-destruct his Dantian flashed through his mind. In his shock, the 2 fingers that were still hanging in the air after shattering the flying sword quickly turned into palms and faced Luo Guang. Bang! A soft explosion sounded from Luo Guang's body. A cloud of white mist exploded and enveloped Luo Guang's entire body. The white mist was sucked into Yu Qianqiu's palms, and Luo Guang, who appeared from the white mist, shocked everyone. Even the experts of the Daluo Sect and Moon Clan who were fighting in the final phase of the Tribulation Passing stage stopped in shock. They had taken time to pay attention to what was going on, and in the end, they saw a scene that they shouldn't have seen. Luo Guang's old but strong body instantly became as thin as a piece of firewood. He had already lost the momentum of charging forward, and all that was left was inertia. Yu Qianqiu casually waved his hand, and a gust of wind that was not very powerful blew him into the air. It was a very strange scene. The body that was floating in the air seemed to be very light, as if it had fallen apart in the air, and a pile of things fell from it. When the body completely fell to the ground, it seemed like there was nothing inside the clothes. A shriveled head with skin and 2 black holes in its eye sockets rolled out with a gurgling sound. A crack suddenly appeared in the skull, and it split into 2 pieces, shaking nonstop on the ground. A gust of wind blew over, and the 2 pieces of skulls, along with a large pile of things on the ground, were blown away. A few pieces of clothes floated in the air. Such a strange scene caused everyone to be dumbfounded. Their expressions were indescribable as they swallowed their saliva with great difficulty. The experts of the Daluo sect couldn't help but look around, shaking their heads. Did Luo Guang disappear just like that? In the end, everyone looked at Yu Qianqiu with fear in their eyes. They had never heard of such a method of killing, and the sight of it was horrifying. Right now, Yu Qianqiu was like a devil in their eyes. As for the women of the Moon sect, they looked at Hua Yungu, who was still in Yu Qianqiu's hands, and couldn't help but shiver. They were afraid that Hua Yungu would accidentally disappear like Luo Guang. It took Yu Qianqiu a while to regain his composure. It was too dangerous just now. If he didn't react in time, Luo Guang would have successfully detonated his Dantian. Then, he would have been out of luck. Although Luo Guang's cultivation was not as high as Yin Baikong's, if he exploded his Dantian, he would probably not be able to withstand it. He slowly put down his outstretched hand and coldly snorted, "Do you have nothing better to do? You actually want to explode your Dantian? You must be tired of living." As soon as he said that, everyone was reminded. Everyone immediately remembered the strange scene of Luo Guang speeding forward. It turned out that he wanted to explode his Dantian and perish together with Yu Qianqiu. Exploding one's Dantian, this was a way to die with both body and soul destroyed. The people of the Daluo sect felt lost. It was hard to imagine how the old sect leader could think of such a way to perish together with the enemy. Such a tragic way to die. Could it be that the old sect leader had already lost the confidence to win and wanted to perish together with the enemy? Zhu Xianxian avoided Yu Qianqiu's stare in fear, and an uncontrollable fear lingered on his face. He had offended Yu Qianqiu several times, and never thought that Yu Qianqiu would let him go. Now that he saw Luo Guang die in such a horrifying way, his back was already drenched in cold sweat. Chapter 685. The strongest cultivator below the soul formation stage. Yin Wuchen looked at Yu Qianqiu and sighed in his heart. If only he could pull Yu Qianqiu into the 10,000 demons. What a pity. Master, the white-browed Luo Qingtian sighed and knelt on the ground. After kowtowing 3 times, he suddenly stood up and pointed his sword at Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu, the Daluo sect, may have had some grudges with you, but that doesn't mean that you have to kill my entire sect. I can let you go if you kill my only son, but why are you so ruthless? Yu Qianqiu waved at a late-stage tribulation cultivator from the Moon sect and pointed at the unconscious Hua Yungu in his arms. The woman quickly took Hua Yungu from him. The other 5 also flashed over to help Hua Yungu heal her injuries. Yu Qianqiu's appearance was equivalent to saving their lives. Sect leader Luo, Yu Qianqiu stared at him and said indifferently, "You are a man of your word. I have always admired you, but you're not a good father, nor are you a good sect master. Whether it's your son or the disciples of the exalted sect, you haven't done your duty to discipline and restrain them. This is the root cause of the destruction of the Daluo sect. The grudge between me and the Daluo sect was formed when I first entered the cultivation world and was still in Ongquangsong. It has nothing to do with the grudges you mentioned." Ongquangsong? Luo Qingtian's eyes flickered for a while, and he said in a deep voice, "Although you, Yu Qianqiu, are famous now, when you were in the Blue Light sect, I'm afraid no one in the Deluo sect knows who you are. Is there a need for our Deluo sect to make enemies with a disciple who has never even left the sect? Well said. Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly and snorted coldly. Then I'll let you die in peace. May I ask if sect leader Luo still remembers the Ong Kwangsung elder, Hao Sansi, who was killed by you for stealing the 7-color Ganoderma? Hao Sansi? Luo Qingtian frowned slightly and muttered, I do have an impression of the rainbow Lingji. As for the injured person, is he called Hao Sansi? The last question was directed at the person beside him. One of the elders guarding him nodded and said, That's right. I have an impression of this matter. That elder Ong Kwangsung who died from his injuries was indeed called Hao Sansi. At that time, the two of them had met on the way back from the New Excellence Assembly and had gotten into an argument over a rainbow Lingji. The person who had injured him was Elder Zhu. However, this matter has already been settled by the Cultivation Alliance, and Ong Kwangsung is willing to reconcile. Many sects know about this. Luo Qingtian nodded slightly and stared at Yu Qianqiu. Since this matter has already been settled with Ong Kwangsung, and Ong Kwangsung is no longer pursuing it, why are you bringing it up again? What does this matter have to do with you? Yu Qianqiu didn't reply to him. Instead, he stared straight at Zhu Xianxian and asked with narrowed eyes, Zhu Xianxian, the person who injured Hao Sansi was you? Hearing this question, Zhu Xianxian already had a bad feeling. He looked at the talkative elder with some resentment and forced himself to calm down. That's right, the person who injured Hao Sansi was me. However, that was also because he stole the 7-color Ganoderma that our Daluo sect found first. Am I supposed to let him take it and not do anything? As soon as this was said, even the Daluo sect's people were silent. They could hear the loophole in his words. Yin Wuchen, who was watching from the side, laughed. That's interesting. If I remember correctly, most of the elders in Ong Kwangsung are nascent soul cultivators. A nascent soul cultivator robbing a tribulation-passing cultivator's thing is really courting death. Moreover, who would believe that a mere Ong Kwangsung dared to rob the Daluo sect's thing? I'm blinded by greed. What wouldn't I dare to do? Zhu Xianxian continued to defend himself. Blinded by greed? Yu Qianqiu raised an eyebrow and asked indifferently, Elder Zhu, do you know what's the relationship between Hao Sansi and me? Here comes the problem. The Daluo sect's people suddenly looked over. This was probably the key to why Yu Qianqiu had mobilized so many people to wipe out the Daluo sect. Yin Wuchen was not surprised. The 10,000 demons had received news from Qiu Yuan, and the Moon sect had also received news from Hua Rui. Yu Qianqiu had already told the two sects clearly, so they both knew the relationship between Yu Qianqiu and Hao Sansi. Zhu Xianxian's heart was pounding. He didn't even have the courage to ask. Yu Qianqiu said coldly, word by word, Hao Sansi is Ong Kwangsung's master after I enter the cultivation world. I am his only disciple. He participated in the new talent assembly for me. His only goal was to fight for a foundation establishment pill for me, a disciple that everyone thinks is useless, who knew that on the way back, he would coincidentally pick a 7-color Ganoderma that brought him a fatal disaster. However, the sect that killed him for the treasures had instead framed him. At that time, I knelt in front of his corpse and swore that I would definitely wipe out the sect that killed him, leaving not a single chicken or dog alive. Do you know the reason now? Zhu Xianxian's face was pale, and sweat appeared on his forehead. It was true that he had evil intentions when he saw the treasure. Plus, he didn't take Ong Kwangsung seriously. That was why he killed him for the treasure. He didn't expect to cause so much trouble. After hearing this, the Daluo sect people all looked at each other. Didn't he just kill an elder of Ong Kwangsung? They didn't expect that the root cause of the Daluo sect destruction was this. Given the Daluo sect status in the cultivation world, even if Ong Kwangsung still existed, he wouldn't take it seriously. Who would have thought that a disciple who had been expelled from a destroyed sect would actually swear to raise the Daluo sect to the ground 20 years ago? If anyone had heard those words back then, they would have taken it as a joke. Who would have believed them? Yin Wuchen looked at the Daluo sect people, who didn't know whether to laugh or cry. Then he looked at Yu Qianqiu and was speechless. This kid was really persistent. He actually worked so hard for something like this. That vow was a joke to everyone back then. He didn't expect it to be true. Yin Wuchen looked around. It seemed that the Daluo sect was on the verge of destruction. The sounds of fighting at the foot of the mountain were getting closer and closer to the peak. Under the strong attacks of the 10,000 demons, the Moon Sect, and the masked men in black, the Daluo sect disciples suffered heavy losses. They could no longer resist and were forced to retreat to the top of the mountain. More and more people gathered at the top of the mountain. Yu Qianqiu glanced at the people of the Daluo sect and suddenly stared at Yin Wuchen. His face darkened. He squinted and said, "Senior Yin, why did I see the masters of the Moon Sect fighting with their lives when I just came up? Are you guys just watching a show?" Yin Wuchen's old face became awkward because he was accidentally seen by someone. He immediately explained, "Yu Qianqiu, you misunderstood. It's not what you see." As he spoke, he suddenly glanced at the masters of the 10,000 demons in the late stage of the tribulation and said sternly, "The Moon Sect led the Daluo sect into our encirclement. Now it's time for us to attack. Kill." With that, Yin Wuchen took the lead and rushed over. The dozen masters immediately followed him and attacked. This time, the 10,000 demons didn't hold back. In addition, Luo Guang had already died in the hands of Yu Qianqiu. Both sides had 14 masters in the late stage of the tribulation against 14. One side wanted to perform well in front of Yu Qianqiu, while the other side wanted to stay alive. In an instant, the battle between the two sides became white-hot. Chapter 686. Yu Qianqiu didn't interfere with the fight. Instead, he slowly flew into the sky and observed the situation below silently. The fighting area on Luoshao Mountain was shrinking. Under the pressure of the three forces, it was like a fishnet that was gradually closing. 8 out of 10 Daluo sect disciples on Luoshao Mountain had died. The remaining 20% were fighting desperately, but they were still retreating. These 20% were naturally the elite disciples of the Daluo sect. However, they had already retreated to the top of the mountain and had nowhere else to retreat. Many wanted to escape, but the masked men in black followed closely behind the 10,000 demons and the Moon Sect. They were like a filter. Air could pass, but humans couldn't. Anyone who wanted to escape from Luoshao Mountain would be killed. Since they were going to die either way, they might as well fight. In their grief and anger, the Daluo sect disciples unleashed their powerful combat abilities. Under the heavy siege, they actually showed signs of counterattacking. Killing one was enough, killing two was more than enough, and killing two was more than enough. These people were the elite disciples of the Daluo sect and had strong combat abilities. Once they fought without any regard for their lives, they immediately caused a lot of damage to the 10,000 demons and the Moon Sect. They actually broke through the heavy siege of the 10,000 demons and the Moon Sect several times, but the masked men in black at the outermost perimeter were too strong. Aside from their flawless combination attacks, a few Daluo sect disciples who were at the tribulation stage would often be attacked by dozens of masked men in black as soon as they broke out of the encirclement. These dozens of people were all experts at the tribulation stage. That scene was like a bubble that had just been blown out, and then it was punctured by someone in an instant. Those who broke through were almost instantly killed on the spot. They didn't even have a chance to fight back. The sounds of fighting and angry roars echoed on Luoshao Mountain. Luo Qingtian looked around with sorrow. The mountain was filled with the corpses of the Daluo sect disciples. The entire mountain was covered in corpses and blood flowed like a river. Almost the entire mountain was dyed red. It was so red that it was glaring and shocking. Under the active treatment of the Moon Sect, Hua Yungu finally woke up from her coma. Her injuries were very serious, and her internal organs were severely damaged. It was impossible for her to recover in a short period of time, let alone participate in another battle. Someone beside her told her how Yu Qianqiu saved her. Hua Yunga's eyes searched for the proud figure in the air. She helped one of them stand up stubbornly and said to the other 5, "Who said that women are not as good as men? Go help the 10,000 demons finish the battle. Don't let these stinky men look down on the women of the Moon Clan." Yes, the 5 women immediately accepted the order and quickly joined the battle. With the addition of these 5 late-stage tribulation transcendence experts, the morale of Yin Wuchen and the others soared. Meanwhile, the pressure on the Deluo Sect's side multiplied, and the situation worsened rapidly. The 5 women did not split up to attack. Instead, the 5 of them joined forces to help the master of the 10,000 demons. 6 of them were at the final stage of the Crossing Calamity stage, so the result was obvious. Not long after, the Deluo Sect's late-stage tribulation transcendence expert was dismembered with a miserable howl. The 6 of them quickly joined forces and moved on to the next target. The death of the late-stage tribulation transcendence expert was a heavy blow to the Deluo Sect, both in terms of strength and mentality. The Deluo Sect's decline was imminent. Luo Qingtian's tiger-like eyes were filled with tears under his white eyebrows. He shouted loudly, "Masters, quickly break out of the encirclement. Don't worry about us. As long as the Deluo Sect still has you, it will have a chance to rise again. After breaking out of the encirclement, quickly go to the coast of the East Sea and meet up with Luo Kuan and the other 4 masters. The Deluo Sect's blood feud will depend on you." The 6 elders who were protecting him quickly raised their swords. They all knew what the sect leader meant. Now was the time to fight for their lives. However, Zhu Xianqian's face was pale. He glanced at Yu Qianshou from time to time, only to find that Yu Qianshou was also staring at him coldly. The hand holding the sword was actually trembling slightly. One of the Deluo Sect's masters who was fighting immediately shouted back excitedly, "As a dignified disciple of the Deluo Sect, how can I abandon the sect leader and escape? Sect leader, leave quickly. We old bones will cover you." Luo Qingtian waved his arm and stabbed his sword into the ground. A black light flashed from his storage bag, and a black token appeared in his hand. The words Deluo Sect Token were engraved on the cloud patterns. Luo Qingtian shouted angrily, "The sect leader's token is here. Everyone in the Deluo Sect, listen to my decree. As the Deluo sect leader, I issue a decree. Masters of the Deluo Sect, quickly break out of the encirclement. All disciples of the Deluo Sect, listen to my order. Cover the old masters at all costs to break out of the encirclement." Furious roars reverberated through the mountain peak, followed by a chorus of angry shouts. Yes, sect masters decree. The Deluo Sect disciples, who had been fighting to the death, suddenly turned around and charged toward the battle between the dozens of late-stage tribulation transcendence experts on the mountain peak. In the face of death, there was no need to think about anything else. Luo Qingtian's words completely ignited their courage to fight for their dignity. Even the sect leader was willing to risk his life. They only had the thought of fighting with their lives on the line. Although there were less than 3,000 Luo Sect disciples protecting the masters, they were the most elite disciples of the Deluo Sect. Their combat power was quite strong. The fact that they could last until now under the joint attack of the 3 forces was the best proof. This bloody battle had already given them the greatest glory. They were indeed the backbone of the Deluo Sect and the elite disciples of the Deluo Sect. These people surged forward crazily and worked together with the masters of the Deluo Sect. They immediately caused a lot of trouble for Yin Wuchen and the others. After killing a few, dozens, or even hundreds of people rushed at them, coupled with the help of the masters of the Deluo Sect, they were even forced to the point where they were not far from death. The situation was instantly reversed. However, the 10,000 demons and the disciples of the Moon Sect naturally could not watch their masters be in danger. The elder in charge of the battle of the 10,000 demons waved his sword and roared, "Kill! Destroy the Deluo Sect! Kill!" The figures in black swarmed forward. The elder in charge of the battle of the Moon Sect was not inferior to the men. She pointed her sword at the Deluo sect and shouted in a sharp voice, "Kill! Kill! Kill!" The white figures swarmed forward. Zhang Peng looked around the battlefield and quickly gestured to the leaders in all directions to shrink the encirclement. The battle instantly became a mess. The most intense battle was concentrated on the Ling Shao Hall's mountain from the Three Mountains. It was a tragic scene. The masked men in black calmly formed an encirclement. The encirclement pushed forward step by step, and the space between them also shrank. Yu Qianqiu gazed at the fierce battle below and spread his arms expressionlessly. Black lights continuously flashed in his sleeves. 2,000 flying swords made of black flames danced in the air, staring at the battle below like a tiger watching its prey. This was the first time he had displayed so many black flame flying swords in public. It was clear that he was determined to destroy the Deluo sect. Seeing the most elite disciples of the Deluo sect fall one by one, Luo Qingtian and the others clenched their teeth with tears in their eyes. It should be known that the Deluo sect had spent a lot of manpower, resources, and financial resources to cultivate these disciples. But today, they were certain that it was all worth it. It was even far from enough. They felt sorry for these disciples who fell one by one. It was too tragic. The 6 elders who were protecting Luo Qingtian burst into tears and cried silently. Even Zhu Xianxian was no exception. He closed his eyes and let the hot tears slide down his face. Right now, there was only endless regret in his heart. He regretted being too greedy in the past and causing irreparable losses to the sect. Elders, let's go. Break out of the encirclement. I beg you, don't let the blood of the Deluo sect disciples be shed in vain. Luo Qingtian screamed at the sky. He suddenly pulled out his sword from the ground and shouted in sorrow, "Kill!" He rushed into the battle first. The 6 elders also roared loudly, "Kill!" Without hesitation, they charged into the fray and began to fight. The Deluo sect's elder who refused to leave took the time to wipe away the tears on his face. He shouted in a trembling voice, "Brothers, let's go. Let's break out." The 13 tearful elders of the Deluo sect burst into a sorrowful roar. High. Disregarding everything else, they rushed together and formed a sharp sword that soared into the sky. They directly tore a hole in the crowd and pierced through the sky. "Where do you think you're going?" Yin Wuchen shouted anxiously and quickly chased after them. His eyes were red from killing. However, at this moment, hundreds of Deluo sect disciples rushed out from all directions and filled the hole created by the 13 elders. They desperately blocked Yin Wuchen and the others who were chasing after them. Yin Wuchen and the 5 experts of the 10,000 demons at the end of the tribulation passing stage worked together to form a sword net. Bang! 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 Blood splattered everywhere. Dozens of Deluo sect disciples were immediately killed by the swords. The hole was once again opened. However, before Yin Wuchen and the others could rush out, another group of Deluo sect disciples swung their swords at them without any regard for their lives. Regardless of the huge gap in cultivation between the two sides, they forcefully blocked the hole once more. Although the Deluo sect disciples had risked their lives to give the 13 revered elders a chance to escape the encirclement, there was still a group of black-clothed men staring at them, especially Yu Qianqiu, who was waiting with his sword. The moment the 13 elders rushed into the sky, the 2,000 black fire flying swords quickly adjusted their blades and aimed at them. Yu Qianqiu sneered. "Let's see where you can run to." Before he finished speaking, the black fire flying swords instantly moved. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. A dense rain of black light came down on them. The net of swords was so dense that it cut off the space for the elders to teleport away, unless they teleported back down. However, that was impossible. The Deluo sect had paid such a heavy price to let them break out of the encirclement. There was no way they could run back and tangle with Yin Wuchen and the others. The Deluo sect didn't have that many people to sacrifice. In an instant, stellar energy shields, astral swords, and the Deluo mountain splitting palm tore through the air. The 13 elders could only hope to open up another hole to escape. Unfortunately, they encountered the black fire flying swords, stellar energy shields, astral swords, and the Deluo mountain splitting palm were their nemesis. The black fire flying swords cut through them as easily as paper. Chapter 687. Break, break, break. All the obstacles were so fragile. The black light that resembled a meteor shower glided past, and the sky suddenly became quiet. Many people subconsciously looked up. The 13 figures had lost their momentum and fell slowly. The black meteor shower that pierced through them stopped silently. The swords turned around and sped up, flying back into the sky again. The 13 figures trembled in the air and were turned into sieves again. Blood rained down, and the 13 figures fell quickly. Yu Qianqiu stared down expressionlessly. The black light that flew back into the sky seemed to have completed its mission and returned to his sleeves like a swarm of locusts. No. Luo Qingtian roared in grief. His eyes were wide open as he stared at the 13 figures falling down. Suddenly, he felt a chill in his chest. He slowly looked down and realized that his chest had been pierced by the flying swords of the 10,000 demons' nascent soul disciples due to his momentary lapse in concentration. Blood continued to gush out of the wound. All the Daluo Sect disciples stared at the 13 figures falling down, and their faces instantly turned deathly pale. They suddenly felt that all the sacrifices and hard work had lost their meaning in that instant. The Daluo Sect disciples were dazed, but the 10,000 demons and Moon Sect disciples who were in a frenzy of killing wouldn't show any mercy. For them, this was the best opportunity to kill their enemies and avenge their fellow sect members. How could they let go? They almost didn't hesitate to kill. The flowing light dragged by the flying swords intertwined like a net, piercing through and bringing out bright red blood lotuses. The Daluo Sect disciples who had persisted until now, the most elite disciples of the Daluo Sect, trembled under the attacks of the flying swords. Some people fell on the spot. However, some people clenched their teeth and didn't fall because they really couldn't accept it. Blood gushed out like a fountain, and their clothes were already soaked in blood. Those people just held on and refused to fall. Their aura made the disciples of the palace of 10,000 demons and the Moon Clan look at each other. No one actually wanted to touch them. In fact, the outcome of the battle was already decided. The battle could have lasted for a while, but it ended early because Yu Qianqiu quickly killed the 13 Daluo Sect disciples who broke out of the encirclement. Yin Wuchen ignored these Daluo Sect disciples who were still standing. He held a sword, stepped over the bodies, and walked straight to Luo Qingtian. The two looked at each other. Zhu Xianxian, who was half kneeling beside Luo Qingtian, kept bleeding from the corner of his mouth. His intestines kept flowing out from the open wound in his stomach, and he kept stuffing them back. But they kept flowing out. Luo Qingtian looked down at him and said in a deep voice, "Elder Zhu, you are the only living elder of the Daluo sect. Stand up." "Yes, sect master." As soon as Zhu Xianxian spoke, blood came out of his mouth, and his words were unclear. However, he still gritted his teeth and stood up. His body was on the verge of collapse as he looked around. His gaze landed on Yu Qianqiu, who was in the air. His eyes immediately widened, and he forcefully spat out a mouthful of blood from his throat. He raised his sword and pointed it at Yu Qianqiu. He angrily roared, "Yu Qianqiu, I curse you to die a horrible death. Even if I become a ghost, I won't let you go. I won't let you go." Yu Qianqiu stared down and said slowly, "Senior Yin, please take his head from me." With a flash of the sword, Zhu Xianxian's head was separated from his body. Yin Wuchen caught the falling head and threw it into the air. Then, he kicked Zhu Xianxian's headless body away. Yu Qianqiu caught the flying head, looked at it by the hair, and threw it into the storage bag. Yin Wuchen said to Luo Qingtian indifferently, "Luo Qingtian, the Daluo sect will be removed from the cultivation world from today onwards." Luo Qingtian smiled faintly and said, The 10,000 demons will have this day sooner or later. The Daluo sect is just a step ahead. I will wait for you down there. Maybe. Yin Wuchen's lips curled into a sly smile. Even if that day comes, I hope you will remember that you, the Daluo sect master, died under my feet. Luo Qingtian's eyes widened, and he shouted angrily, "Old Yin, how dare you!" A disciple of the 10,000 demons dashed over and kicked the back of his knee. He shouted, "Kneel!" Luo Qingtian's body swayed, and he couldn't stand steadily. He almost knelt down, but he used his sword pillar to support himself. The disciple of the 10,000 demons wanted to continue kicking, but Yin Wuchen waved his hand to stop him. "Forget it, I was just joking with him." The disciple retreated angrily. Luo Qingtian struggled to stand up. Yin Wuchen narrowed his eyes and stared at him. "But everyone in the world will know that the Daluo sect master died in my hands." With a flash of the sword, a bloody wound appeared on Luo Qingtian's neck. There was no blood because the blood in his body was almost drained. His body, which had just stood up, fell backward and lay on the corpse of his fellow disciple. Luo Qingtian struggled to turn his head around. His unfocused eyes wanted to take another look at the Daluo sect, but he saw the disciples of the Daluo sect who would rather die than fall. A gratified smile appeared on his face as he recalled the distant past. At that time, these disciples had just joined the Daluo sect, and he was standing here on the steps of the Lingxiao Hall. He waved at these disciples who had just joined the Daluo sect and shouted in high spirits, "The Daluo sect welcomes you." From today onwards, the second-ranked Daluo sect will be your home. One day, you will be proud to join the Daluo sect, and the Daluo sect will be proud to have you join. Luo Qingtian's eyes stopped moving completely, but he still had a smile on his face. Yin Wuchen looked in the direction he was looking at. It was the group of Daluo sect disciples who were still standing. He waved his hand and said, "Kill them." Immediately, a group of 10,000 demons rushed out and cut down the Daluo sect disciples who were still standing. Yu Qianshou withdrew his gaze from below and nodded at Zhang Peng. Zhang Peng quickly gestured for the team to retreat. All the masked men in black quickly searched the corpses of the dead disciples. After they were done, they quickly regrouped and fled to the primeval forest at the foot of the mountain. Yin Wuchen's eyes flickered as he stared at these masked men in black who knew when to advance and when to retreat. He had some questions to ask Yu Qianshou, but he recalled how Yu Qianshou killed 13 Daluo sect consecrators in an instant. He had a lingering fear and swallowed the words that were on the tip of his tongue. "Senior Yin." Yu Qianshou stared at the ground and said, "The Daluo sect still has some people on the coast of the East Sea, especially Luo Kun, Cui Zhaofan, Limeng Bai, and Zhu Zhao. If they are left alive, they will be a disaster. We must eliminate the root of the problem." Yin Wuchen smiled. The 10,000 demons and the Moon sect have been prepared for this for a long time. From the moment we decided to attack the Daluo sect, we gathered 8 late-stage tribulation-passing experts and a large number of elite disciples to ambush them. The news of the Daluo sect being attacked must have reached the coast of the East Sea. Luo Kun and the others are probably on their way to help. They might have already fought with us on the way. As for the Daluo sect disciples scattered around, we have already prepared a plan to deal with them. In short, kill them all. That's good. I hope we don't leave any survivors. Yu Qianshou waved his hand and pointed at the ruins of the Daluo sect. He smiled. The battle is over. It's time for your 2 sects to divide the Daluo sect's wealth. I won't disturb you anymore. Enjoy yourselves. Wait. Yin Wuchen stopped Yu Qianshou, who was about to leave. The latter frowned. Is there anything else, Senior Yin? Yin Wuchen's expression was solemn. Although we have taken down the Daluo sect this time, the 10,000 demons and the Moon sect have both paid a heavy price. I just want to remind you that I hope you still remember what you promised us. There's no need to doubt that. Everyone knows that I, Yu Qianshou, am a man of my word. I don't need to speak of anything else, but I speak of my word. As soon as he finished speaking, Yu Qianshou cupped his hands towards the crowd below him and said, "Farewell." As soon as he finished speaking, he'd fled towards the primeval forest below the mountain. The domineering Daluo sect had finally fallen. Luoshao Mountain, which originally belonged to the Daluo sect, was now occupied by the disciples of the Moon sect and the 10,000 demons. The disciples of the two sects searched everywhere for the Daluo sect's wealth. After dividing it, the Daluo sect's spiritual stone mine was also waiting for them. According to the previous agreement, the Daluo sect's wealth was divided into 3 equal parts. The Moon sect would get 1, and the 10,000 demons would get 2. Of course, there was a reason for this. The 10,000 demons sent out twice as many people as the Moon sect. It was the same for the experts at the end of the tribulation stage, who were responsible for the main attack. Following the principle of more work, more pay, the 10,000 demons should get the lion's share. There was no doubt about that. Although the two sects had paid a heavy price for this battle, they had also gained a lot. The wealth that the Daluo sect had accumulated for thousands of years was not a small number. In the blink of an eye, it had become someone else's wedding dress when the news of the Daluo sect's disappearance spread. The entire Huaxia cultivation world was shocked. Such a big thing couldn't be hidden even if they wanted to. In fact, when the two sects mobilized a large number of people, it attracted the attention of many other sections. It was just that no one expected the two sects to attack the Daluo sect. Even the Daluo sect itself didn't expect this, let alone other sections. For the various sects in the Huaxia cultivation world, this was unbelievable, especially for the orthodox sections. No one expected that the Moon sect, which was made up of a group of women and ranked 3rd on the orthodox sects, would collude with the 10,000 demons, who ranked 1st on the orthodox sects, to attack the Daluo sect and the Daluo sect, which ranked 2nd on the orthodox sects. Then came the news that the Moon sect and the 10,000 demons had joined forces to ambush Luo Kuan and a large number of the Daluo sect's people who had returned from the coast of the East Sea. Led by Luo Kuan, from masters were killed. None of the Daluo sect disciples who followed him escaped. All of them died in battle. That wasn't the end. The Daluo sect disciples who were scattered outside were ambushed on the same day. Even the disciples who were doing business in the Wu family and the 100 Flowers Valley couldn't escape. They were lured out and killed. The Daluo sect's businesses outside were all forcibly taken over by the 10,000 demons and the Moon sect. As the saying goes, a centipede dies, but it doesn't fall down. The Daluo sect was deeply rooted and had a large number of people. Under such a large-scale purge, many people still escaped. But unexpectedly, the Hong gang and Qin gang, which usually didn't have any conflicts with the large sects, also took action quickly. They hunted down the remaining disciples of the Daluo sect everywhere. Under the joint efforts of the 3 forces, almost all traces of the Daluo sect were wiped out. Chapter 688. A Conspiracy. All the sects doubtlessly suspected that this was a conspiracy that had been planned for a long time. Just imagine, the 3 forces joined forces within a day. If it was not a conspiracy, what else could it be? However, the strength of the Daluo sect, which was ranked 2nd on the righteous path, was undeniable. Was the Daluo sect really wiped out in a day? On Mount Luoshao, no one stopped the guests who came from all directions. All the sects sent their competent people to personally verify it. When the people who left passed by the people who came, they all shook their heads at the latter with a sigh. Soon, when the people who came later landed on Mount Luoshao, they understood what the former meant. It was a scene of devastation. The originally majestic 3 main halls had become ruins. The mountaintop was dyed dark red with blood. There were corpses everywhere. It was almost impossible to find a place to stand. It made people wonder if this was really the world-famous Daluo sect. Rats crawled among the broken limbs. Flocks of vultures, eagles, and crows were not afraid of the people coming and going at all. They flew away in fright when they saw the people coming, but then they flew back without hesitation. They trampled on the corpses, pecked, and tore them apart. This place had become their paradise. There were also vultures, eagles, and crows that came from all directions. They began to peel off piles of white bones. Dongfang Chong Ao was personally ordered by the sect leader to check and verify. He stood on a broken stone tablet. Below the stone tablet was a broken horizontal board. Although he did not read the words on the horizontal board, he could still guess that it was Ling Xiao Hall from the broken handwriting. He wanted to find Luo Qingtian's body and bury it. After all, Luo Qingtian was the leader of a sect. Everyone belonged to one of the top sects in the righteous path. There was no reason for his body to be exposed and be trampled by those feathered beasts. However, he could not tell which body was Luo Qingtian's because this place had long been trampled by a group of feathered beasts. He was famous when he was alive, but what about after his death? The smell of blood in the air had yet to disperse, and the gloomy wind had yet to blow it away. It was as if there were countless spirits of the dead wandering around the mountain peak and weeping. Occasionally, someone would fly over, startling the group of feathered beasts. After looking around and confirming that the Origin Immortal sect had indeed been razed to the ground, no one dared to linger. Cupping their fists to Dongfang Chan Ao, they bid their farewells and flew off into the distance. This wasn't a good place to chat. Dongfang Chan Ao stood on top of the broken monolith, looking at those figures who were leaving with an emotionless gaze. At this moment, he suddenly thought of Yu Qianzhou's poem that was widely spread among the various countries. His gaze lingered on the clouds and dogs in the distant heaven and earth. He sighed in his heart and slowly recited in a deep tone, riding the sword to traverse the vast heaven and earth, white bones like a mountain of startled birds. The world is like a tide, and people are like water. How many people in Jianghu return? How many people in Jianghu will return? The lingering sound lingered on the mountain peak, but the person on the broken tablet was nowhere to be seen. A figure disappeared into the distance. The Origin Immortal sect had been razed to the ground, and the entire cultivation world was in turmoil. The slaughter of the 10,000 demons and the Moon Clan was unanimously criticized by the entire righteous path, especially the Moon Clan. They had become traitors in the eyes of the righteous sects and received the most intense condemnation. The diabolism all remained silent. To them, it was a good thing that the righteous path had suffered a heavy blow. However, the 10,000 demons had made such a big move at such a sensitive time when enemies were waiting for them. They didn't dare to flatter them. However, the destruction of the Origin Immortal sect had already become an established fact. Other than condemning them, what else could they do? Would any sect be willing to take revenge for the Origin Immortal sect? To the various sects, only the Origin Immortal sect that was still alive was valuable. The destroyed Origin Immortal sect could only support them on moral grounds and would have nothing to do with them. It was true that the Moon Clan was being condemned, but it had naturally become the second largest sect of the righteous path. At the same time, it had made a fortune that was equivalent to hundreds of years of accumulation for the Moon Clan. Among those condemning sects, how many sects were actually secretly envious of the Moon Clan? Only the victors had the right to establish themselves in the cultivation world. Even if the losers didn't die, it would be difficult for them to establish themselves. This was the reality of the cultivation world. The incessant condemnation stopped abruptly after a piece of news came out. It was said that this time, the 10,000 demons and the Moon Clan had joined forces to destroy the Origin Immortal sect because Yu Qianzhou had taken revenge for Ong Kwangsung's former master. The entanglement between them had been spread clearly. Perhaps even House Sansi himself did not expect that he, who was not famous in the cultivation world when he was alive, would become famous in the cultivation world more than 20 years after his death. Even the righteous sects, including the Fuxian Island, all remained silent. There were even some sects that had been condemning Yu Qianzhou before, but now they suddenly changed their tune and started to praise Yu Qianzhou for how he respected his master, how he endured humiliation to avenge his master, and how he was a role model for the disciples of other sections. As for the victim, the Origin Immortal sect, they were gradually described as greedy villains who killed for treasures. They deserve to be destroyed. In the world of cultivation, strength was always more useful than a glib tongue. History had proven that this was an irrefutable truth. The truth was always on the side of the victors. The origin immortal sect would be engraved on the pillar of humiliation, and Yu Qianshou would be a good disciple who endured humiliation to avenge his master. The internal strife in the cultivation world of Huaxia made the sects nervous. They were worried that because of the internal strife, the Wuji Island would take the opportunity to attack. However, what surprised the Huaxia Cultivation Alliance was that the Wuji Island had been very quiet during this time. There wasn't even the slightest sign of provocation. They obediently played their part. This made people feel that they were worried about something or waiting for something. It gave people a feeling of silence before an explosion. In fact, Bai Changchun's reappearance in the cornucopia made the forces of the various countries behave a lot. The old man's terrifying skills made the soul formation realm lords of the various countries unforgettable once again. It was better to wait until he went to the East Holy Land. Anyway, the day of the East Holy Land's opening was not far away. There was no need to provoke Bai Changchun at this time. The wind was bleak, the water was cold, and the warrior was gone, never to return. At the border of the west, war drums thundered and shook the heavens, and bugles sounded. Millions of brave soldiers moved, war horses galloped, and the army began to gather in the clouds. The fierce west wind, beside the tall platform, the commander's flag with the word "sure" fluttered in the wind. On both sides of the platform, there were 3 large drums that looked like round tables. In front of each drum, there were 2 burly men with bare arms, waving sticks and beating the drums. The 6 drums vibrated at the same time, and the deafening sound pierced through the clouds. Generals quickly came to the front of the platform to receive their orders. On both sides of the platform, there were 6 rows of generals, and each row had 20 soldiers. All of them were clad in armor, their faces solemn and murderous. The 6 thunderous drums suddenly stopped, and the rumbling sound echoed in the air. Outside the gate, surrounded by high fences, there was a hua-hua sound of armor. Shi Wenguang held a long sword at his waist and walked in with a majestic gait. His armor shone brightly, and the bright red cloak behind him looked like it was dyed with blood. Behind him, there were 2 personal guards following closely behind him. However, there were 2 rows of 6 generals, and a total of 12 generals accompanied him. Shi Intian was impressively among them. A line of 15 people walked into the field in an orderly manner. After the 12 generals escorted Shi Wenguang to the platform, they scattered to both sides and stood in front of the 12 rows of generals below the platform. Shi Wenguang held his sword and stood in the middle of the platform, looking down with a pair of fierce eyes. The generals who were qualified to stand under the platform were all famous generals of Huaxia who had followed him through hundreds of battles. Which one of them didn't climb out of a pile of corpses? But today, greetings, Grand Marshal. More than 100 generals shouted in unison, and their voices reverberated in all directions. All of them knelt down on one knee. Shi Wenguang swept his gaze around and raised his hand to signal everyone to stand up. He then took a deep breath and shouted in a deep voice, "The Li dynasty is cruel and heartless. Corrupt officials run amok and prey on the common people. For the country and the people, we have fought bloody battles at the borders for many years, but in exchange, we can't return to our homes. How many people have broken up their families? Although we are brave men, we also care about our country and the world. We hope that the common people can live in peace and prosperity. This is the duty of us iron-blooded soldiers. But we can't survive, and we can't even protect our wives and children. Are we supposed to protect the Li dynasty where treacherous officials and corrupt officials gather? Are we supposed to be loyal to the Li dynasty's imperial power that makes the common people unable to live in peace? No, no, no. The generals and the surrounding soldiers raised their arms and shouted in unison, and their momentum was astonishing. Although my family is reunited now, it's hard to erase the hatred in my heart that I've exchanged for a lifetime of military service. Hatred, hatred, hatred. Shi Wenguang cried out in pain. Then he said loudly, "Now, I'm willing to repay the people's kindness of raising me with my hot-bloodedness, overthrow the Li dynasty's tyranny, and return peace to the world. Are all of you willing to follow Shi Wenguang to conquer the world and make new contributions?" With a whoosh, the generals below the stage knelt down on one knee again. They cupped their hands together and shouted, "We're willing to follow the great marshal with our lives. We'll go through fire and water, and we'll do anything to overthrow the Li dynasty's tyranny and return peace to the world." "All right," Shi Wenguang shouted. "All generals, listen up." Everyone immediately stood up and listened to the orders solemnly. Shi Wenguang's gaze swept past everyone and shouted again, "Yin Ping Wengao, where are you?" Two generals quickly walked out from the ranks and cupped their fists as they said in unison, "We're here." Unexpectedly, Shi Wenguang stared at them coldly from the stage. He waved his hand and said with a sneer, "Tie them up." The two generals were dumbfounded. Before they could react, they were immediately pressed to the ground by the ferocious soldiers who rushed out from both sides. Their helmets and swords were taken off, and they were tied up. The generals on both sides stood silently and stared coldly at the two people tied up on the ground. No one pleaded for them, as if they weren't surprised at all. "Why is the great marshal like this? Did I break any military rules?" The two of them struggled and shouted on the ground. Their faces were covered in dirt, and they were forced to kneel on the ground by the ferocious soldiers. "Why ask when you already know the answer?" Shi Wenguang stroked his beard and said indifferently with a cold gaze, "Although the two of you have followed me for many years, you're actually spies sent by the Li family to spy on me. In the past, I didn't touch you two because I wanted the Li family to be at ease. Now that the army is about to go on a punitive expedition against the Li family, how can I leave two spies by my side to ruin things? It just so happens that the army is about to go on a punitive expedition and needs human heads as sacrifices. I'll have to trouble the two of you. Great Marshal, you're being wronged. Marshal, you're being wronged." The two of them struggled and cried out for their innocence. Unfortunately, Shi Wenguang didn't even care about them. Instead, he waved his arm and shouted, "Bring them in." There was a commotion outside the gate, and hundreds of soldiers who were tied up were pushed in. Chapter 689. All of these people had stones stuffed into their mouths and had hemp ropes covering their mouths. None of them were able to speak. Their faces were filled with fear as they whimpered, as if they wanted to say something. However, Shi Wenguang had no intention of listening to what they had to say. All of them were forced to kneel on the ground. Other than the people who held them down, there was also a red-robed executioner with a demon-headed blade standing behind each of them. All the generals looked at these 500 people and knew what was going to happen next. However, none of them did anything. Not a single one of them came out to plead for mercy. This was because they knew that these 500 soldiers were the same as Yin Ping and Wen Gao. They were all spies planted by the imperial court within the army. It was just that their ranks were not as high as the two spies. Usually, they were not touched because they did not want to alert the imperial court. But now that the army was about to move out, the Grand Marshal only needed to give the order to capture them all. Looking at this situation, Yin Ping and Wen Gao's face instantly became extremely pale. They understood everything. It seemed that their every move was already in the grasp of the Grand Marshal. Today was the day to capture them all. "Marshal, spare me." Yin Ping struggled to stand up and cried out to the tall and sturdy figure on the stage. Two soldiers raised their thick blades and smashed them on his calf. "Kacha!" The sound of bones breaking could be heard clearly. Yin Ping let out a painful groan and knelt down again. Wen Gao, who was also struggling, saw this scene and had a desolate expression on his face. He shouted towards the stage, "Marshal, great general, this subordinate knows his mistake. I beg of you, great general, for the sake of this subordinate's years of fighting and risking his life for you, please forgive this subordinate this time. This subordinate knows his mistake, great general." The two soldiers who were holding him immediately swung the backs of their thick swords, directly striking his mouth. With two pawpaw sounds, blood mixed with broken teeth sprayed out. His mouth was immediately badly mutilated, and he could no longer speak loudly. Shi Wenguang held onto his sword and stared at the two of them in silence. After a long time, he slowly said, "After the two of you die, bless my army from the underworld. Since the two of you have followed me into battle for so many years, when I conquer the world, I will treat your family well in the name of military martyrs who died in battle. Military law is merciless. The merciful do not command soldiers." Shi Tian stepped forward and cupped his fists. "Here." Shi Wenguang gently waved his hand and said, "Send the two generals on their way for me." "Yes, sir." Shi Tian threw off the white robe behind him, turned around and walked towards Yin Ping and Wen Gao, then took over the broadsword from the red-clothed executioner. Shi Wenguang stretched out his hand, and someone immediately handed him a red lot. Shi Wenguang picked up the red lot with 2 fingers and threw it off the stage. He shouted, "Sacrifice to the flag cut." Shi Tian sends the 2 generals off. Shi Tian bowed to Yin Ping and Wen Gao with his saber in his hand. He then walked in between the two and swung his saber left and right. Pu sounds could be heard as 2 steaming heads fell to the ground. Shi Tian's white robe was dyed red by the blood he spat out. Shi Tian returned the blade back to the executioner and returned to his position. Soon after, more than 500 saber flashes could be seen. Pu sounds could be heard as more than 500 heads fell to the ground. In an instant, blood splattered everywhere, and the smell of blood filled the air. The generals have been fighting for many years and were used to seeing life and death. These 500 heads did not even have the qualifications to make them frown. In front of the plateau halfway up the mountain, Yu Qianshou stood quietly under a large tree, calmly looking at the mountain deity temple at the foot of the mountain. The strong sunlight shone on his face, causing his expression to change unpredictably, as if his heart was not as calm as he looked on the surface. The Qin clan and Hong clan now included all the rogue cultivators in the entire Chinese cultivation world. Their members were spread all over China, making them the best place to gather information. Compared to the 100 Charms Enchantress Pink Sect, they were much more flexible. Most importantly, these 2 clans were all under his command, and he could command them as he pleased. It was not like the time when he needed to gather information from the Pink Sect. After knowing that Shi Wenguang's army was about to make a move, he had been sitting here, receiving all kinds of information from all over the world. Shi Wenguang could handle the war, so he didn't need to worry about it. What he paid attention to was the reaction of the various sects in the cultivation world when Shi Wenguang's army made a move. To him, there were 2 battlefields in China. The secular world was Shi Wenguang's and the Li dynasty's battlefield. On the other hand, his battlefield was the cultivation world. He didn't allow any sects in the cultivation world to intervene in the secular world's war. Once he found any abnormal signs, he would do his best to put an end to it. Even Fuxian Island couldn't. After struggling, working hard, and going crazy in the cultivation world, he already had enough confidence to make the so-called world's #1 sect, Fuxian Island, shrink back. A figure flashed and landed on the plateau in front of the room. Gu Qingyun strode to the back of Yu Qianshou, and Yu Qianshou asked without turning his head, "Is there any new news?" Shi Wenguang's million-strong army has already made a move. Before Gu Qingyun could finish, Yu Qianshou suddenly turned around and looked at him, asking, "How's the situation?" Hong Gang and Qin Gang are paying close attention to the movement. Currently, the various sects in the cultivation world have no reaction, and they seem to be waiting for Fuxian Island's reaction. The strange thing is that Huaxia Empire is Fuxian Island's exclusive property. Shi Wenguang revolted, but Fuxian Island has no reaction. It's a little hard to understand. Gu Qingyun said with a puzzled expression, "There's nothing strange about it. I've already warned Fuxian Island, so they won't dare to act rashly for now." Yu Qianshou casually said and asked, how's the situation over at Shi Wenguang's side? Gu Qingyun was a little surprised as he didn't expect him to even dare to warn Fuxin Island. He then said with a smile, "This person is really good at fighting, and his subordinates are all peerless generals who have been through hundreds of battles. In addition to the million-strong elite under him, the imperial court's troops are no match for him. I reckon the Li dynasty is already restless." Yu Qianqiu said with an "oh," and asked with a smile, "What's the situation?" Gu Qingyun explained, "The Huaxia Empire has 6 million troops, and the Zhu State, Wei State, and Ping State generals are in charge of 1 division each. Each division has about 2 million troops. In reality, the movement of Shi Wenguang's army had already alerted the imperial court, and they had already ordered the Wei State general in the east to personally lead his army to defend. The Wei State general, on the other hand, did a good job. He led 2 million troops, and once he arrived at the west, he sent out 300,000 troops to guard the Black Wind Gap stronghold. This place is easy to defend and hard to attack, so he thought it would be foolproof. Who knew that Shi Wenguang had already secretly sent out 50,000 elite troops before he sent out his army? They went through untold hardships and crossed the mountains to lie in ambush behind the stronghold. Once the army neared the Black Wind Gap, Shi Wenguang sent his son Shi Yintian to lead 100,000 troops to attack. They worked together with the 50,000 elite troops that infiltrated the stronghold. In less than a day, they took down the Black Wind Gap and opened up the path to the Central Plains. The people he picked didn't disappoint him, so Yu Qianqiu was more or less relieved. He said with a smile, "All's fair in war, as expected of the famous great General Shi. I didn't expect Shi Yintian to be the one who made the greatest contribution." Gu Qingyun nodded and continued. After Shi Wenguang took down the Black Wind Gap, he ordered 3 generals to lead 300,000 vanguard troops to attack the main force of the Wei State general from 3 different directions. The remaining 900,000 troops of the Wei State general were utterly defeated, and the Wei State general was no longer in the mood to fight, so he fled in panic. After that, Shi Wenguang's 3 vanguard troops advanced with irresistible force. In just a short 10 days, they took down 3 residences and 18 cities in the west, completely clearing away all the obstacles in their way to the Central Plains. The next step is to fight the vast land of the Central Plains. The wealth, population, and food of the Huaxia Empire will all leave the Central Plains. It would be strange if the Li dynasty is not anxious. Yu Qianqiu laughed heartily. Amidst his happiness, he frowned and muttered, "Shi Wenguang's offensive is ferocious. I'm afraid it will force some people to take desperate measures. You and Hong Qi must keep a close eye on the movements of the sections. If there's anything wrong, tell me immediately so that I can deal with it." The news of Shi Wenguang's rebellion spread throughout the entire Huaxia Empire in no time. The whole of Huaxia was in a state of shock, and within the borders of the whole country, the imperial court began to forcefully recruit a large number of able-bodied men to serve in order to block Shi Wenguang's attack. In fact, this was also a last resort. The imperial court would never have thought that the Wei State general, who is equally as famous as the pillar of the state general, could not even withstand the attack of the former for a month. 2 million troops. They were defeated just like that. What else could they do but recruit able-bodied men? From the capital of Huaxia to the rest of the country, all the high-ranking officials and nobles began to panic. This was because these people with vested interests were originally attached to the current regime, absorbing the wealth of the people. Once the regime was overthrown, their good days would come to an end. Not to mention good days, whether or not they would be able to keep their lives in the future was still a problem. It was not like Yu Qianqiu's previous world, where once they were full of money, they could easily escape to a foreign country due to special circumstances and continue to live a carefree life. Also, due to some special reasons, no one would really pursue and punish them. So, who cares if your country is good or bad? What can they do to me? What does it have to do with me? Although these people usually lived a luxurious life, they were not as stupid as the pigs in the pigsty. They knew more than the common people. It was fine if the Huaxia Empire's army was used to bully and extort unarmed people. But if they wanted to fight against Shi Wangguang's army, which had been fighting bloody battles at the borders for years, that was a joke. It was no different from courting death. For a moment, everyone panicked. In the heavily guarded palace in the capital of Huaxia, His Majesty flew into a rage during the court meeting, scolding the Wei State General for being an idiot. However, throwing a tantrum was one thing, but he still had to think of a solution. Thus, he pointed to the Ping State General. As for the Ping State General, he used the excuse that he and his men had to protect the important areas of the capital region, so it was not convenient for him to move out easily. In the end, the flustered and exasperated His Majesty flung his sleeves and left. Then, he found the current imperial preceptor and asked the power behind the Li dynasty for help. You're tuning into the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.